Da, Chiquita, croeso iechyd Prifysgol yn Iron Bevan. Welcome to the Health Board meeting of an Iron Bevan. It's nice to see everybody here today. We have a couple of guests and welcome. Any declarations of interest at all in any of the issues that we will discuss in the general meeting? No. We have Louise, who's absent, and will return to our departing colleagues at the end of this part of the meeting. Okay, thank you. Could I take the draft minutes of the Health Board meeting held on the 24th of January, please, for approval? Are there any amendments? No. No? You're happy to accept? The action log?
Thanks, Chair. So the log has 7 complete actions, or those which are transferred to the committees to take forward. And there are 2 actions not yet complete, which relate to IPFR and a 6 goals programme update, which are due to come back to the board in May. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that satisfactory? Everybody content? Okay. The report on sealed documents and Chair's actions. Rani?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So the paper summarises the 3 applications of the Health Board's common seal during the reporting period, and a summary of 5 actions taken by the Chair on behalf of the board, utilising urgent Chair's action in line with standing orders. So the board is asked to ratify both the application of the seal and the decision taken by the Chair in line with standing orders, and the detail is summarised within the paper. Thank you.
Thank you. Are you content?
Yes.
The number of Chair's actions is quite high. It is not normal for us to use so many Chair's actions, but you can see from the nature of them the rationale for our having to take Chair's action. But as you know, I tend to be slightly reluctant to do this, and rather it was part of normal business. But it was necessary in this on these occasions to take the necessary action. And indeed, we're going to have to take a couple of Chair's actions, which Sarah will outline to us in the confidential section of the board today. So if you could please stay to listen to what they might be, and then help endorse the Chair's action, that would be really helpful. Thank you. My report, can I just say it's been an extremely difficult time for everybody in the organisation over the past 2 months, and particularly in the last week, where we've been subject to a number of stresses. And I'm really deeply grateful to all the staff for the huge commitment that they have shown to delivering patient care over this last year, which has been difficult, but particularly in the last 2 months. Apart from my usual visits and meetings, I have chaired 2 RPB meetings and a workshop, and what we're concentrating on at the moment very much is evaluating for cost effectiveness and value the schemes within the Regional Investment Fund and also the capital programme to ensure they fit in with the strategic aims of that RPB. We've also been taking some major steps forward in reorganising the RPB itself and how it operates and its governance, which had not been looked at for I don't know how many years really, but certainly was in need of amendment and alteration. So that's been a busy time, but it has allowed the RPB members to come together to determine what our strategic aims should be over the next 5 years, and what we see as the major priorities that we should pursue collectively amongst all of us and with our colleagues in the voluntary sector, the carers and the citizens and the private sector to pursue. And I think that was a valuable exercise. You will not be surprised that children is the first of all those actions and priorities, particularly given the situation that falls to us at the moment and our colleagues. I've chaired 5 meetings of the Ministerial Advisory Group into accountability and governance within health bodies in Wales. We've had some workshops. We've had a lot of very, very good responses from a vast array of individuals and collective groups, looking at how they find accountability and governance quite confusing and what they have suggested should be improved, which has been very interesting indeed, particularly as there's such a great deal of synergy, which is helpful, because if everybody said completely different things, it'd be a bit difficult to work that one out. We are supposed to finish our report this week, but fortunately, we've had a week's stay of grace, so we've now got to get it in 10 days. Fortunately, the minister who commissioned it is still the minister, which means that you actually write it a slightly different, more definitive way than you would have. But I look forward to presenting that to her. We've had some real help from the people on that working group, who all come from very different backgrounds and can take quite a different and objective view on what they hear from individuals. So that's been okay. I've also chaired the Chair's Peer Group. They are exercised, as we all are, about resources, both workforce and financial, but mostly very concerned about the ability of us to meet the ever rising demand. And you will see in our performance reports, those rises in demand are reflected in every other health board, and the pressure that is placing on the organisations and their staff, and particularly the patients who, as you've heard from the review this morning, undertaken by the King's Fund and I think Nuffield, the lack of certainty amongst the population about the availability of care. And that's one of the major things on which we must concentrate over the next year, and ensure that patients who are having to wait understand why, and when they're likely to be seen and what can happen in the meantime. It's really, really vitally important to maintain the confidence of the population in our ability to look after them when needed. We also had a ministerial away day. And this is only the second that chairs have ever had with the minister for a whole day. When we were very grateful for her time to listen to the concerns that chairs have about their organisation's abilities to maintain safe and effective services, which doesn't mean to say we're not, but you know, we are all very mindful of this, and about the changes in services about which we will be consulting over the next couple of years. But it was quite an enlightening day, really. And then we met the minister the next week with the chief executives to look at the interface issues with social care, and also the changes that are to be affected in the way in which care can be delivered. So it's been, apart from the normal, it's been very, very busy indeed. But nevertheless, everybody seems to be much more of a mind that is similar in the sorts of concerns that are being experienced everywhere. And that's not just in Wales. And there is a real enthusiasm both between the chief executive and the chairs to help each other to sort out the problems with our colleagues in local authorities. So that's what I've been doing. It feels like endlessly never ever going home, but there we go. Any questions? No, I shall of course circulate the Ministerial Advisory Group stuff once published to you all, and I'd be very pleased to hear what you think about it, and don't be too rude. Okay. The report from the Chief Executive.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So as the Chair said, it's been a really busy couple of months, and as you'll see from the board agenda, a huge amount of work has gone into preparing for the year ahead with the development of the annual plan and the financial plan. Both, you know, the amount of work done by divisions, operational divisions and the corporate teams has been extensive, you know, trying to balance the challenges of the financial context with the need to address some of our performance challenges and continue to meet the increase in demand that we see, and trying to get that balance between ambition and deliverability has been fine balancing act, and we'll talk about that later as we come up with the annual plan. And at the same time, we can't afford to take our focus on continuing to deliver against our commitments for this financial year. We continue to see improvements across a range of areas, but continue to see some of the challenges, particularly around urgent and emergency care system. But I am pleased that we've reduced our financial forecast down to 49 million from 56. So again, recognition of the efforts to continue to try to improve on that financial context that we're working in. And this is all despite significant pressures that continue across the system, and that we're not unique as a health board. This is continuing across Wales and the UK, and including 2 industrial actions of our junior doctors during that period, which we are currently in the middle of that, of one right now. It's been the most difficult yet. You know, we all knew that trying to cover colleagues over an Easter period, a 4-day period leading up to the Easter bank holiday as well, was going to be challenging, and it absolutely has been. The amount of work that's gone into the prep, I can't say enough. There's been absolutely heroic efforts by the teams, both in terms of the planning, trying to cover shifts with less workforce around, and trying to de-escalate. The amount of work that went in last week by our teams to de-escalate our urgent emergency care system is immense, and put us in a really positive position as much as possible as we went into this week. And we've been in a much better position across our urgent emergency care system as a result of that kind of heightened effort, which you know, isn't really sustainable. But we did. It was so important for us last week. So I just want to say a huge thank you for that. And we've got I'm sure we've got another difficult week and a half, particularly ahead of us, as we continue through that kind of Easter period. On a positive, I'm pleased that we did open the breast unit at Ysbyty Ystrad Fawr. Huge achievement, great job by so many staff, and really positive feedback already around that new facility, which will be really positive for our breast cancer patients and brings lots more opportunities as we move forward. And cancer continues to be an absolute top priority for us, and we'll be picking that up through the council report that's on the agenda. I also had the benefit of attending the launch of the SEAM project. This is an art project that was done in collaboration with the Health Board, Race Council Cymru and Welsh Government. And it was very much around using art to celebrate the contributions of Black, Asian, minority ethnic groups from health and social care across Gwent. You know, it was showcasing some of the artists and the people involved in the art were all you know, part of that kind of project. Really was a successful and really relevant in the context of the equality report we've got on the agenda later as well. But really pleased, and I know Race Council Cymru were thrilled and felt the Health Board was really leading the way around this commitment to this agenda. I think as well from the reports and some recent visits, our continued commitment to children and young people. I know we talk about it quite a lot at the board. We had a visit from the Children's Commissioner for Wales recently to the CAMHS team 2 weeks ago, and was really pleased with all the progress the teams have been making around the whole CAMHS agenda with our partners, particularly that upstream and single point of access, but recognise some of the areas of where we've got some challenges still around waiting lists, so that's a priority for us going into the new year. And you'll see from the Director of Public Health report today, which was all through the eyes of children, our voices, our future, and really are keen to use that insight to inform future plans. And also the corporate parent charter that's on the agenda, that commitment to working with others around looking after children. We also launched the Women's Health Network this month, which is really trying to build on the data that we've got around some of the challenges around women's health and the inequalities that we've got evidence for across our communities, particularly in healthy life expectancy. And the work Tracy has done around the Joint Strategic Needs Assessment has been really helpful and insightful in terms of testing whether we're doing enough work in some of these really important areas. Huge amount of national work. I know the chair referenced it, but particularly again on the agenda, we've got the new Joint Commissioning Committee, which has been huge amounts of work by everyone across Wales on that. The EMIRT service, which I'll pick up under the ESC update, and also the Value and Sustainability Board at a national level continues to progress and move forward, which is focusing on those opportunities on the money really at a national level, and the benefit of working as once across Wales, as well as what we do in locally has been really helpful. And then finally, just in terms of our commitment to the workforce, the staff survey is now completed and we've had the reports issued. We put them on the intranet, but we are having a session tomorrow with our OD team in terms of understanding what insight that gives us, albeit it is a starting baseline for us. And we obviously want to get more people to complete this going forward, but really trying to understand what that's telling us alongside the surveys we've been doing regularly as part of our own wellbeing surveys. And we've continued to strengthen our communication and engagement. We've launched our kind of new common strategy called 1AB, and we've been doing lots of site visits, and all executive team members, we're all doing one drop-in session at different sites every month. So we're out there a lot more doing site visits and giving people the chance to share their feedback with us. And we build it on that as the year goes on. And then finally, our staff recognition awards are out. I think it's closing on Friday. We've had a phenomenal number of applications already, particularly around our Patient Choice Award, which is so lovely to see. We're not quite sure we're going to do them all yet, because there's so many members of the public that have chosen to put members of our staff forward for our award, which I think is testament to the great work that goes on out there every day. So that's what I was going to say. We've got a busy first quarter of 24-25 ahead of us. I feel we're in a more stable position than we were this year. The team is all in place and has been pretty much for a year, which is good. But we've got huge challenges ahead, as we know, and the work in the first quarter will be around putting more granularity around our plan, the delivery framework, and actually delivering on some of those key priorities. Yeah, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any questions to Nicola? Thank you very much, and we reiterate all good wishes to the staff and support for them. Could we move on, please, to patient experience and public engagement, and 2.1, the report from SICE. Gemma, please.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, everybody. Yeah, I'm very happy to take you through our FLICE paper today. Without going into each bullet point in great detail, I'd just like to highlight some significant points for the attention of the board. Under our representations section on page 6 and 7, I just need to highlight that we're still actively working through a representation about a gynecology consent to treatment matter that was raised to us by a member of the public. And I'm really grateful to the Health Board for the contact that we've had to date about this matter. We're still working through it. The second point of the YYF security staff issue is something that I will be writing back to the Chief Executive about shortly. Thank you, Nicola, for your response to date. We do have some further questions, and I'll submit those to you in the next 2 weeks, if that's all right. I do wish to highlight point 3, the Castlegate Medical Centre matter. We were made aware that some additional services that are offered by GP surgeries across the patch are offered off contract, so they're not core and they're not obliged to undertake them, but they are undertaken locally at the gift of each local GP surgery. Some had been withdrawn from Castlegate at short notice, and I'm grateful that the primary care team acted as swiftly as they did with managing this situation. But obviously, as an organisation, we're a bit worried about the spread of risk of other practices that may also have additional services that are not contracted, and what those could be and the impact if they were withdrawn from the community. So I know that I've had a discussion with the chair and the chief exec about this, and I'm hoping that we can take some sort of mapping exercise together, forward together, to understand the spread of the additional services that are out there. A new matter brought to us was the Trefethin Clinic in Pontypool. We know that we always receive extremely positive feedback about the service offered by the nursing team there. We've had some conflicting views about the opening hours of the nursing sessions at Trefethin. So I've been working with your planning team, and I'm hoping to have a meeting with the service soon about the public's perception of what the opening hours are, and actually the official line that I've received. So I'll be taking that forward shortly. A new matter added to our representations that isn't covered in the report is our recent letter to the Health Board on the EMERTS service, which is the Emergency Medical Retrieval Service. So even though it isn't cited in my report, I know that I submitted a late letter on behalf of Llais about the engagement exercise that was done on a national level to engage people about the location of air ambulance bases in Wales. So I just want to add that matter. Moving on to our hips and knees survey, I know that we had a conversation about this at our last board meeting. Unsurprisingly, people are responding about communication while they're waiting for their hips or knees surgery. And we were a bit concerned about the severe levels of pain that some people are reporting whilst they are waiting. So it would just to highlight at this point that if people aren't contacted when they're on waiting lists and they are in severe pain, there's some evidence then that they're not really sure what to do, whether to go back to their GP surgery or whether they can in fact contact the clinic that they're waiting for. Our final point on the winter patient experience, we had low responses this year. We normally expect around 500 replies, but we were in the hundreds this time round, which means that we will take a view to revise how we handle this project in the future, because if people's appetite has changed in terms of how they want to engage with us over a project like this, and we'll certainly adjust our methods to get the best out, to get the best feedback that we can out of that, so that it's useful for the health board to learn from. And unsurprisingly, we always receive really positive feedback about the clinical care that the staff offer, not only at the minor injuries units, but at the Grange after their very long wait. And I know that I've bullet pointed that the waits are the most contentious issue that people raise to us, but it's not just the wait, it's the reported condition of the environment while people are waiting, which could be quite disturbing in some stories, from the hygiene reported in the area, the overcrowding, and seeing people sitting on the floor. So just to raise the real issue of what the wait is like in terms of the environment on that point. But we will certainly revise how we undertake this project in the future. I'm happy to pause at this point and take any questions, please.
Thank you very much, Gemma. Are there any questions to Gemma?
Thanks, Gemma, and really appreciate your report. Just to pick up one or two of the points. So just firstly, in terms of the EMERTS letter, we have added that into the papers under the Easter update. So there is a record of that now in the papers, just for your reassurance. I think in terms of the orthopaedic waiting list and that kind of support was offered, I know we've been working, and again, as part of the national work around how we can support people while on the waiting list. So that is a key area of focus for us. So we'll hopefully be able to offer more support in that area as we go into the new year. And the other one around the kind of waiting experience of the waiting room of the Grange, which I completely recognise, and obviously the more we can do to decongest the area first as part of our urgent care plans is one, but also we will continuing to look at what kind of volunteering support we can offer to the area while people are waiting, again just to maximise comfort and help people with any queries or issues. I'll pick up the cleanliness issue, and then obviously our waiting extension is very active at the minute. The building work is on site, so the sooner we can get that in place, then obviously the better. But appreciate we need to do what we can while we're waiting for that to make sure the situation is much better. So thank you for that feedback.
Thank you. Paul?
Gemma, we're 12 months on, I think, from the from when you were set up. Have there been any major lessons learned in terms of your particular organisation and how things have gone for you and Gwen?
Yeah, certainly. One of the biggest lessons for us is that having a new remit with social care, having 5 local authorities under our remit now is it is an added pressure where some other regions maybe have 1 or 2 local authorities. But we know that we've come into this year very health heavy just because of our history, and us needing to rebalance as an organisation into how services are moving towards integration, how social care and health work together. But as an organisation, we've moved forward in a more strategic way. So we have set very clear direction now in our first year for the next 3 years. And I know that our strategy will be launched in April at a national conversation event, which is going to be held in the Principality Stadium in April. So we're far more of a cohesive organisation now rather than 7 independent community health councils. And we're certainly learning to take further steps into social care to rebalance the spread of the feedback that we're getting from people.
And could I just ask, could I just sort of seek your thoughts on the children and young people agenda? Because again, looking at your report, I think I mentioned this probably last time as well. You know, I don't see that coming through the report. I think it was a discussion at the Regional Partnership Board. Can I sort of make a plea really that the children and young people voice is really very important in the health and social care setting?
Of course, yeah. I think I mentioned the last time that we were going to be undertaking a children and young people's transition survey, which has been slightly paused at the moment, just so that we can get the partners in place who will support us with that. But we recognise that we need to increase our footprint within our younger population. We are actually attending a Coleg Gwent Open Fair in May. We're also attending the university's Freshers' Fair this year as well. So where there are events where young people gather, or we know that we can attend specific groups, our public engagement team are working very, very hard to map where we can go appropriately. You know, the next stop will be whether we can come give presentations at high schools. So yes, Paul, completely agree with you, and we'll make much bigger steps in that in the year to come.
Good, thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any further comments to Gemma?
Can I just make?
Yes, Penny.
Sorry, we talked about the environment in A&E and welcome the extension obviously to the Grange, which is very necessary. But can some thought be given to the furniture? I mean, it's such a basic thing to say, but the chairs are very uncomfortable, and it's not just the space; it's the actual, the furniture that you're giving and what you're offering to the patients.
Yeah.
So I just wondered if you can ensure that some thought is given to that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
This is the second lot of furniture we've had. Yeah, I think third. Oh God.
We did have metal chairs, which have been changed.
Right, I haven't seen.
Yeah, so the metal chairs which were put in during COVID, and we have replaced all of those because they were with the first, but they were changed because of the infection control. Now got pink, more comfortable chairs, but they're not saying they particularly where you'd want to sit for hours. But we have moved on from what you possibly are referring to, which I think lots of us were quite concerned about.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
May I come in on that point as well, because I completely agree with it. One of the things in terms of seating and chairing is the space for access chairs, particularly wheelchairs. If you transferred somebody into a hospital wheelchair, they're quite large, and I've often observed them being placed in front of the triage doors, so it can be difficult for the doors to be opened if somebody is sat in front of them. So if the layout and chairing and seating is being looked at, it's bays for wheelchairs to be able to sit next side, somebody that's supporting them as well.
Yeah, and just to to reassure, the current waiting room will become extended assessment area space, because the new waiting room will obviously have double the capacity, and hopefully will avoid that situation where wheelchairs are in front of triage doors.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. If there's nothing further to Gemma, thank you ever so much, Gemma, for all the work that you and your colleagues and volunteers do. It's, as ever, very, very helpful to us. And I do hope that you see that we take your concerns seriously and act on them. And we look forward to continuing to work with you.
Lovely, thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Could we now go to the patient's story, please?
And welcome, Letitia. We're very grateful that you're here today. And Tanya and Catherine to support you. It's nice to see you. Thank you so much, Letitia, for coming. Tanya.
Thank you for inviting us. We are hoping that our volunteer annual report will come to board in the next couple of months. But we thought today would be a good showcase really of the success of our volunteer to career initiative. I'm very grateful to Letitia, who is, well, no, Letitia can tell you. Could we go on to the next slide, please? Most people here will know that our old ethos in volunteering is through the life course. So through our intergenerational work with children and young people through to older adults, opportunities are open for everybody, regardless of age and regardless of their ability or background, really. The intergenerational work was paused due to COVID, but we've picked our agenda back with another launch in September. Next slide, please. We work very closely with workforce and our equality leads on the inclusive approach to volunteering. A lot of people will know about the Learning Disabilities internship. We have a number of volunteers now who are befrienders with learning disabilities or additional needs. And we had one lady that we thought many on the board will know, Julie, who was a lady with terminal cancer, registered blind, who was so impressed with the care that she received from the NHS. She wanted to give something back. She was turned down, I'm afraid, by a number of voluntary organisations because of her needs, and they put her in touch with us. Well, we don't turn anybody down. So regardless of the fact that she had a terminal illness and she was registered blind, our team, led by Catherine, enabled her to become a telephone befriender by keying into her phone the numbers of people she would support, and she could voice call those individuals. And prior to her very sad death, she was supporting 3 individuals during COVID who were lonely. And for Julie, it was a lifeline for her. Next slide, please. We've worked very closely with all of our partners, voluntary and statutory sector, and we've been really fortunate over the last 2 years to secure some funding from Helpforce Cymru to drive forward a few initiatives. One is the End of Life Companion that we worked closely with Helpforce and Marie Curie. We have a trainer who has undertaken the Marie Curie training, who now trains our End of Life Companions. We have 32 currently who support people in hospital who are at risk of dying alone. Going forward, we're having discussions through the End of Life Care Board and the bereavement work around how those End of Life Companions can support people in the community. We embarked on the Volunteer to Career. We were the only health board in Wales to secure funding to pilot this. And I'll leave that to Letitia and Catherine to explain. But we've also secured funding this week to develop another volunteer to career pathway for people with lived experience of mental health and learning disabilities. They're really excited. We are hoping the money will allow us to fund 15 hours of a band 2 to support this. And we are hoping that somebody with lived experience will be successful in, what do they call it, positive recruitment. We're hoping that somebody with lived experience will take up that post. So I'll hand over to Catherine if we could go to the next slide, just to give a little bit of a summary on the volunteer to career pathway, and then Letitia will tell you her experience.
Thank you, Tanya. Yeah, so volunteer to career. So we were looking at this prior to COVID, and then obviously COVID hit, and then we were looking at then to be in contact with Helpforce then, we were able to secure some funds to provide and look and at speed, really, and pace, put volunteer to career together as a pilot, as Tanya mentioned, then with the support with Helpforce. This has been embedded and ongoing within the health board and within our volunteering structure. And anybody that comes into volunteering with us at interview is asked if they would like a career within health and social care, not just within the health board, wider, that we could support them with or look at giving them options. So once they've come through our recruitment and done a 30 hours with us, we then arrange to meet with them to look at their career options and what it is they're looking for, whether they'll be a student looking for further work experience, or perhaps medical recruitment, signposts in there to do some shadowing with the consultants, whether it be work experience in looking at different opportunities. For some of our volunteers, they've never stepped foot within a hospital setting, those are a hospital base. So actually it gives them the insight of seeing different roles, seeing the porter, seeing the dietetics, the physios, the OTs, admin, different roles for them to question and come to us to ask and inquire about different things that they'd like to have perhaps more experience in. Within the health board, obviously our volunteering roles are mainly befriending only. So this is the reason why we signpost and support them in looking at obtaining a work experience placement, if that is something that they like, or linking in with other agencies then to support them. And as Letitia will say, you know, it could be looking at different environments. So looking somewhere within a community ward. So they want a more acute setting. Do they want to look at mental health? Do they want to look at a care home setting? You know, and supporting them and getting that experience to be able to progress. And if it is their goal to achieve a job. We've had 12 of our volunteers so far that have gained employment, 2 outside health, the 10 then within health. We've had several being signposted to work experience, and we always support them. So any new role that they come to is just touch on a new role, then we link in with staff side then for any comments in relation to the role to make sure that it's not in relation for paid role, that it is a befriending role, and how we can improve on that or look and to support. We've got over 20 different role profiles at the moment, supported across the health board within the community sector, telephone befriending, home visits, care homes, hospital settings, dementia friends, end of life Tanya said, therapy chaplaincy, welcomers. There's a whole range of support out there, and supported by our ward staff. Then those are on the board, the volunteers are supported by our ward staff to make sure that they embedded them within that group with support from us as well. And we support then any teams that are looking for a new role within the health board. We will support that. We've had several new roles this year. The Barbie group, the alcohol support team, and the cancer pathways we've been linking in there. So we've had the cancer cafes, cancer befriending, and WhatsApp, the first WhatsApp group we set up just recently this year as well, supporting the gynecology team.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to come here. My volunteering, it was massive, a massive difference that I really needed. I grew up raising my siblings, helping towards raising my siblings. A bit of difficulty, difficult relationships, and then I found volunteer to career and changed my life. I was a befriender to patients on the wards. I'd go in, I'd have little chats, and just seeing the difference even 5-10 minutes could make was insane, and it made me want to go back. It made me want to go back every day until I could change all of them and make them all smile. It's helped me with so much. My skills, my experience, I can communicate confidently. I wouldn't be able to do this a year ago. Just everything. And I'm now in a full-time employment. I'm extremely happy where I am. And to me, it is all because of my volunteer to career role, and everyone I spoke to, Catherine, the whole team's support was amazing. It was insane. It was the most amazing thing that I've done, and I appreciate the opportunity to do that as well. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Letitia. That was really heartfelt. And I think you look really successful sitting in front of us. So, and well done for putting up with the strain of trying to trying to talk to us, and we really appreciate it. Thank you, and we wish you great success for the future. But you seem to have bounded through to success so quickly that it's really heartening. Is there any questions, Jenny, and then Sarah?
Not a question, but just to say that Catherine and the team, the work they do with young people, with families, with encouraging people into volunteering in the NHS. And I think our volunteers are our unsung heroes.
Yeah.
You've heard the number of areas they work. I think we've got over 300, is it now?
Almost, yeah.
Yeah, nearly 300 volunteers who provide services across the organisation, particularly in that pastoral context. And you've heard the opportunity it gives people to get back into work and to a career that's fulfilling and enables them to move on with their life as well. So, I think Catherine and the team do a huge amount of work. I think they are very quiet about it. They move about the hospital and you'll see the green T-shirts, but it provides such a lot of support for our patients and their families at a time when they desperately need it. So a massive thank you from me to Catherine and Letitia for the work you do and the support you give.
Thank you. Sarah?
Thank you. Congratulations, Letitia. It's fantastic to hear your story, and it's a real privilege for us to have you here today. I know Tanya knows how much I support the scheme in terms of our volunteer to career. And Tanya, you mentioned some other volunteer routes that we use, for example, the LD internship, which is mainly in facilities and estates. And it's not a question really, but a challenge back to all of us in the room, because there's so much more we need to do to turn those opportunities into employment. Because there are still some barriers for us turning those skills into meaningful paid employment, which I think we can all collectively come forward and create those opportunities together. And I think, Catherine, you quite rightly mentioned the work experience route. And we tend to look at the work experience framework and policy that we have through the lens of school children and colleges. But I've had some feedback just this week, I think, around some of the parameters of that policy, which I can see have been put in place for good reasons. So, for example, we haven't supported work experience beyond 6 months in the past. And I can see why, because we want to have that balance between opportunity and not taking advantage of any paid roles, which I think is something our trade union colleagues are particularly concerned around. So, you mentioned the partnership working there, Catherine. So I think it would be a good opportunity for us to look at that policy through the lens of the volunteer experience as well, to make sure that we're covering all of our angles and widening our route to access meaningful training and employment in the best possible way.
Thank you.
Thanks. First of all, I love the fact that you want to go in and make a difference to everybody's life. Because I think it's really about what impact you have, isn't it? And if you think about it, it's making a massive difference to your life, but actually you're making a massive difference to other people's lives and quite possibly inspiring them to go on to do the same thing. So it's a bit like you've dropped a pebble in the pond, isn't it? And who knows how many people you will touch remotely throughout your life. My question is a little bit around the support that we can give to people beyond kind of learning disabilities, but people with physical disabilities. How do we make sure our built environment is going to support the volunteers? Some of that will come back, I think, from that volunteer feedback through you. So that was going to be my question, is there more we can do with our environment in order to help this programme spread further? But no, it's brilliant. It's brilliant to hear from you. Thank you.
Add in there that we do have volunteers with disabilities, and we do risk assessments to ensure that we can get them in a placement that's suitable for them.
I think it's key for us to look at that work experience framework and some of our other access around, through this volunteering lens and through the equality and inclusion lens as well, which is kind of what I was referring to, because we've had some feedback, and I think the feedback that I've received this week is somebody with a particular disability, isn't it? So it's really timely, I suppose, in terms of this strategic policy plan on the agenda.
That's
as
why
well.
it was in my
Yeah.
mind. Thank you.
Nicola and then Paul.
Yeah, it was, again, thank you I love your story and I love the pleasure you get out of bringing so much joy to everyone else. So thank you. I suppose it was just in terms of how you found out about it and how much more. I know the team have got to make sure they've got the capacity to support it, but I think we can do so much in this area if we've got the resources to support it. And because of our double win in terms of how it helps you and how it helps so many other people. And it was just how you found out about it and what more we perhaps should do to promote this as a route for people for support and opportunity.
I was working with another support group and I got signposted to yourselves. I think maybe it could be a bit more out there with maybe just leaflets, or because honestly an opportunity like that, you can't miss it. You can't. Anything just to get it out there would be amazing, so everyone could have a chance, because I do again happily.
No, you'll be a nurse next.
Yeah, I'm going to try and do my nursing next.
Good,
Yeah.
well done.
Look at the roles that you're doing. So you said you do 2 days a week here and 2 days meaningful activities,
Yeah.
So
Paul.
Can I just say, I think one different example, I think an inspiration to many, so very, very well done. Nicola mentioned resources, just to put my charitable funds hat on. I think that's an area that has funds available, and there may be some opportunities to talk to the charitable funds team, see whether or not there's funding available and what the criteria is, etc. Because I think that we've got funding in health, social care sector, and I think let's go for it.
We're very, believe me, we're very linked in charitable funds, every opportunity.
Good.
Thank you.
That's you. Thanks.
Penny.
Yes, I just wondered if you went to career fairs in colleges and great. Because
for them all.
we talked about work experience, which is so important for young students, but not everybody wants to carry on with education.
No.
So it's an ideal way of getting it.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah,
Thank
I
you.
think we were invited to Cross Keys.
That's where I was for you. So great. Well done. Thank you.
Any further questions or comments?
Well done.
No? Well, thank you so much for coming, and thank you, Catherine and Tanya, for the really excellent work you do, which is quite creative and inventive, but makes such a difference to people, so that they can make a difference to people. So, and good luck in the future. And you can come as, she might be director of nursing in.
Yeah.
And thank you, and good luck with your career.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, on to section 3. 3.1 strategic planning for 2025. Thanks, Chair. Thanks for all of that. Letitia to this one up. Yeah, thank you. So the plan is presented today for board approval. Board members will know the requirement of the Health Board to submit an integrated plan that balances over 3 years in line with the NHS Finance Act. Via an accountable officer letter, Nicola, as Chief Exec, has already signalled to Welsh Government that we will be unable to do this for 24-25 due to the prevailing and ongoing and challenging financial and service pressures in the context post-COVID. So hence our plan is presented as an annual plan, but with a 3-year intent. Notwithstanding this, as an organisation, we are committed to returning to a position of service and financial sustainability, and whilst managing in year the risks, opportunities and improvements required, ensure we're making progress against both our organisational priorities and the ministerial priorities. So in that vein, the plan's being developed working with teams. Nicola touched on it in her Chief Exec update. Can't thank teams enough from across the services, clinical operational colleagues and corporate teams as well, who've worked really hard together to pull a plan together, trying to balance all those elements in terms of ambition, deliverability, focus on, we've touched on their children population, but also on some of the deliverables that are required.
We have had, in terms of engagement on plan development sessions ourselves as a board, some updates through some of the committee structures. We've also held sessions with trade union colleagues and our wider senior leadership group on a number of occasions in order to ensure there's ownership, understanding, and we are testing in terms of, as I said, balancing those requirements. Included in the plan submission is the plan document itself. It's made up of a number of elements. So the plan document itself, which hopefully you've had time to review. There are some hyperlinks in there if there's eagerness to delve into some detail in certain areas. And then there also are a suite of appendices, many of which are mandated by Welsh Government. So the minimum data set, which is very number heavy in terms of workforce finances, activity, etc. Then there's a suite of ministerial templates, which you should find complement rather than, so there's a bit of duplication there, but it's a requirement in terms of specific asks on some of the national programmes. CN plans, cluster plans, and also this year our capital prioritisation forms part of our Welsh Government submission. The plan is framed around our shorter term actions and also leading to a longer term changes. So recognising that we will be balancing in-year delivery of commitments as well as continuing to work on developing the plans and options for later years. And we are still using the life course approach when we're talking about the longer term in terms of not losing that focus on prevention in the pursuit of sort of in-year delivery. So obviously there's a lot of detail in the plan. In terms of the commitments in there, we have tried to strengthen the approach in terms of real clarity on deliverables, milestones and impact of those changes, both for the service areas, but for the enabling areas as well. You'll see that by quarters within the plan, then with milestones into years 2 and 3. So recognising there is a lot of detail, I just want to, we've tried to summarise the real priorities. We've had a couple of conversations about that in our sessions that we've articulated sort of upfront in our delivery commitments, and just to draw these out. So in terms of our priorities within the plan, it's our improvements to the urgent and emergency care system, not just due to the recent sort of escalation, but our own identification of the improvements around patient experience, system pressures, and performance there. Our continued focus on prioritising our capacity towards cancer, recognising that the demand into cancer continues to grow. We'll see that later on the agenda. The delivery of the improvements required to our mental health services, again, a subject that us as a board and as exec team taking very seriously in terms of the improvements there. And then the service estate and capacity changes that were required and we are delivering this year that will support us in our sustainability journey. So the changes to St Willis Hospital, the focus on providing Neville Hall in light of the RAC, and service changes in our ELGHs. Children, we've hopefully seen we've strengthened a focus on children, not just in terms of our delivery around sort of ND services, vaccinations, but also our work with partners on Best Start in Life, which has been mentioned today already. And in terms of planned care, our continued focus on long waiting patients, recognising we still have a huge challenge, as you'll see from the information in the plan, on planned care. So our commitment to, we're nearly there, but our commitment to actually deliver and then sustain the position of no patients waiting over 156 weeks and reducing the number of specialties where patients are waiting over 104 weeks. But just to pause on that, I think it's an awful lot of work from the team in terms of nearly, at the point where we've nearly eliminated those excessive waiters, but sustaining that will take focus as well. So but for example, currently in the cohort of patients that if we did not treat them would breach 3 years this time next year, that's over 4,500 patients. So it's the constant relentless focus of teams to maintain that as well as bringing that tail down. Obviously, our financial plan as well, and delivery our financial plan commitments, which Rob will delve into in more detail into the next section. This year we have set out our performance ambitions with those quarterly milestones which will help us when we are translating the plan into our delivery framework specifics and our accountability conditions. So that will be support us in that. It's important to mention some of the risks in delivery of the plan. So obviously, and we're acutely aware of it in the current moment, the impact of any ongoing industrial action throughout next year can't be understated in terms, not just in terms of the impact in those periods of industrial action, but the preparatory work that Nicola touched on as well that's required. The impact of the context on our staff in terms of their well-being and availability, in terms of turnover and recruitment challenges. Elements of our plan are relying on capital to deliver our priorities, given the example of the Neville Hall RAC priority, which will require capital investment. And the capacity to deliver, as I've touched on, deliver the plan in year whilst working on the future years. And these do align with our corporate risks, as you'd expect. And then lastly, because I'm sure there'll be questions, is just to reiterate the point that this is a point in time, it's an important point of time as we're coming to the end of 1 year, going into next year, but we haven't finished our planning work. We've got a session as execs tomorrow to look at our delivery framework and delve into some more detailed elements of the plan. But so we haven't stopped, particularly some specifics. I'm sure Rob will talk about, you know, ongoing actions to de-risk finance elements of the plan, turning some of those pipeline opportunities into more certain deliverables. From a clan care perspective, whilst we've made good progress, we have three specialties that are particularly challenging in terms of the numbers of patients waiting. So we've moved from having 7 specialties with long waitings of over 104-week patients down to 3, but within those 3 the numbers are increasing. So, and in terms of ongoing work, we will continue to work on those 3 specialty areas, doing deep dives to ensure that all productivity, efficiency, pathway areas are sort of deployed within within the financial plan that's been agreed. And I think, just to be honest and clear, but I think this is an area that Welsh Government will come back on in terms of our numbers of patients in the planned care trajectories at the moment. And then linked to that, the ongoing work to shore up our route map to sustainability in year 3, which was stated as a clear intent. So fleshing out the granularity in terms of years 3 and 4 on those service estate and other changes to give us that line of sight to balance. So I'm sure there's many questions, even though we've had a chance to look at some of this in other forums, but happy to leave it there, Chair, and take any questions.
Thank you very much, Helen. We appreciate the amount of work that's gone into delivering this annual plan in very, very difficult circumstances. Could I take questions, please, Paul?
First of all, I'm really, really pleased to see the work on children and young people, which is, I think, brilliant. You've got milestones, but there is one millstone, and the millstone is the issue of finance. And this issue over the 3 years, have we got categoric assurance from the Welsh Government that that position is accepted? That this plan over the 3-year period, that's an accepted position, or are we waiting to find out whether it's an accepted position?
Well, I'm happy to start with Nicole, but they haven't received the plan yet.
Right.
They're aware of it. We keep them updated through our regular contact points in terms of where we are. They're not expecting a plan that balances. I think that's fair to say, Nicola, isn't it? And so they will want to scrutinise and stress test the contents of the plan. And my anticipation is, particularly in our areas of escalation, is that through the escalation arrangements that will be put in place, as well as through our usual contact points, there will be some communication challenges in elements of the plan. But I think it's fair to say, Nicola, they're not expecting us to deliver a balanced plan, because we signalled it through the accountability letter that Nicola wrote in February.
Yeah, so I think, you know, given where we are this year, I think the key message has been we need to demonstrate improvement from where we are, and to have a line of sight of how we could get to a balanced plan. They call it that roadmap to sustainability. So I think, you know, as Hannah said, I think the process that we that have been put in place around targeted intervention with Welsh Government, I think would be really helpful for us to get into some of the detail of the plan, the assumptions we're making, and to give them hopefully that assurance that we absolutely are kind of got a grip on the issues. The plan is quite ambitious again in terms of the level of savings, because if you look at the full year effect of this year's savings, we'll come on to the financial plan in a sec, the full savings plan and the further work we're going to do, you know, you're up to 50 million, which again is unprecedented in other parts of the days and what we've seen before. I think we've got probably more work to demonstrate the efficiency improvements we're going to make. I think some of it's happening, we're not making it obvious enough. There's more we need to do to improve efficiency, some of which is included in the plan, some of which we need to try to go further. And again, some of those efficiencies are about, do we want to do more activity or do we pull back capacity, because we can't really afford to do loads more extra activity. So I think if we put in a balanced plan, they probably won't believe it was achievable in 1 year. So I think as it stands, I feel it's a robust starting point. We absolutely will be committed to making it better. But I think at this point in time, we've set ourselves a relatively ambitious plan with a huge amount of work. The bit that I would also say from my experience is we've got quite a lot of granularity underneath those savings plans. You know, often they are lots of work to do. You know, you might have a generic heading saying workforce efficiencies without the detail. Lots of this has been done bottom up by the division, and there's a level of, that doesn't mean to say they're all in, you know, they're all kind of over the line, but there is a level of granularity around how we can deliver this. So as Hannah said, I don't think it will be a huge surprise. They will want us to improve on that, which we want to improve on that as well. But I think that joint dialogue in terms of where those opportunities could be and where we might need more support for them in that joint dialogue would be helpful.
There's no concern about there being a further escalation of them if we don't put in a balanced plan?
Not at this stage, because I think for me it will be the level of assurance they get through the targeted intervention process to be reassured that we absolutely have got a grip on this in a line of sight of how we get to a balanced plan.
Has the targeted intervention effectively started in terms of the additional help and support?
No, not at this point. There's a meeting scheduled for the 9th of April, which will set out how this is going to work and the de-escalation criteria. And we've been sent some initial the performance framework that will be discussed at that meeting. So we'll have a much clearer kind of idea around that de-escalation criteria and how this is going to work alongside our current processes.
I think that'll be helpful for the board to see. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got a few questions and a couple of comments. And whilst, first of all, tremendous amount of work has gone into it, and I've absolutely noted that this is a starting point, and I think you've both mentioned that this is a starting point. So I think, you know, plainly, I think we'd all agree with the kind of principles that are contained within this. My first question is really about whether or not we're ambitious enough with our time scale. So that would be my first question. And the other one is probably just a matter of presentation, really. We've got a plan on a page. So I don't feel that if somebody was to pick that up from outside of the Health Board, that they would know what it really meant in terms of, you know, what are we actually aiming to do over 3 years? And when I looked at it, I thought, well, it's all sorts of things that we would like to achieve, things like improving and continuing. And there's something around who we're going to do it with and what those life course goals are. But I didn't feel that if you were just to pick that one page out and it says plan on a page, you wouldn't really know. So I wonder if there's something more we can do to just give some clarity around that. But yes, my primary question is around that kind of, how ambitious are we being with the time frame with this?
Thanks, Pippa. I'll come to the last bit first. Yeah, in terms of the plan on a page, I think it's more sort of the framework on a page, isn't it, rather than actually the specifics. So I think that's a really helpful point we'll take back in terms of how it's presented, recognising subject to how conversation goes today. This will need to go in. But in terms of our communication with partners, with our teams, I agree, and I think there's something we can do to turn that into something more specific and in a punchy way to
to make that clear. In terms of timescales, do you mean specifically in terms of route to sort of sustainability or on some of the commitments within
Yes,
the?
I guess some of the commitments, I suppose the one that pops into my head is the RAC. You know, and that's the first thing that comes out of this. I mean, I know that we've got all sorts of areas, but there's something about just the worry about things like that. Then there's also worry about, I mean, we heard it in the FICE report about, you know, people waiting in pain, for example, is, you know, should we be thinking, well, 3 years is actually what we're trying to get under, or should we be trying to say, well, actually, nobody should be waiting, you know, longer than a year in pain. So there's something around, you could pick up all sorts of things out of this plan, couldn't you, and say, could we be more ambitious in this area or that area? And every person around this table will have a different thought or a different priority around that. So that's why I couched it in that kind of more general term.
I think I'd be interested in other colleagues' reflection on this, but we have, through the conversations with our senior leadership group, through Leanne's cross-divisional groups, tried to do that balance, recognising that you know, let's deliver and deliver well a couple of things, and then move on to the next, and then deliver those, and then there's the piece, I think I touched on it in presenting the papers, how we make sure we keep the focus on the in-year delivery, as well as the general, you know, delivering the service day to day, as well as working up the bigger items for future years. We've tried to find that balance in terms of ambition and realism. It's a factor, it is something we're picking up, and I think it came through in some of the NHS Confed stuff as well, back to government in terms of, and it's not the only reason, but in terms of some of to do some of these changes, the processes. So the RAC, we've had, you know, confirmation from Welsh Government that, you know, 5-case model, 3 business cases, public consultation, notwithstanding some of the you know, urgent and then pressing need to resolve that in order to deliver something new and fit for purpose. Some of the processes drive the timescales, and it's how we can, as best as possible, challenge or not so much sequence, but how we sort of double run on some of those. So I don't know what views are in terms of, we've tried to find that balance between not over promising and under delivering, but still being ambitious, recognising recognising the challenging context we're working within.
Yeah, and I think you're right regarding processes, particularly when it comes to things like business cases. And there is quite a slow process that sits behind all of this. And I think there's a question really about whether that's, and that's not a question necessarily for this board, but there is a question more generally around whether in this day and age, you know, when we can all order Amazon shopping at 2 o'clock in the morning and have it delivered by 10 in the morning, whether those processes could be improved. But it's not something we can fix today.
Rob?
Yeah, I was going to come back to the point about the TI to a degree. I think the challenge for the health board is to just live within the parameters we've been given, if you like. So and in terms of the ambition for that. So the ambition is to get financial balance over 3 years. It's been touched on around the operational environment we're operating within, which is far more stressed than it's ever been. And it is that balance. So the TI is not just about a financial plan for 3 years, it's about a credible clinical plan as well. Yeah. So there is that balance as well to be held. I'm probably going to say something everybody already appreciates, but to get headroom to improve, we have to look at how we do things and where we do things. If we're going to use the approach, I'm doing a little bit of the finance paper now, but if we're going to use the long-term approach, which is new pressures dealt with through new funding and recovery through savings, getting our headroom means that we need to look at how we effectively operate ourselves and what can we rationalise. You heard me say before, we've got to demonstrate efficiency before we affect patient services. Consequences to that are obvious to all, I'm sure, and it does come down to what our priorities are. And, you know, we talked about Thais raised about Gemma earlier about pain. I mean, I'm sure none of us want pain patients in the community. But where would be appropriate perhaps to, I won't say disinvest, but perhaps to slow our actions perhaps in terms of priorities, and that that's a very difficult place to be. I appreciate that, but as that is the challenge we have. So I think our ambition needs to be measured with our ability to drive change and improvement whilst living within the parameters we've been given.
Thank you. Any further comments?
Might I just make a comment?
Yeah.
So I think it'd be remiss not to mention the strikes. You know, we're in our third junior doctor strike, consultant strike coming up. BMA are scheduling monthly strikes. This has been going on for 13 months in England. It's out with our control. I am full of admiration for the operational divisions. The amount of planning that has been required for each strike has been huge. And they are the same people who have been redesigning their services and looking at how to deliver services day to day amongst the operational pressures. So I absolutely endorse the ambition within the IMTE, but there is a fairly major obstacle that's running alongside us that I think I probably would be honest not to mention.
Thank you.
It's costing us, Rob, I think it could, at the moment, the strike's costing us between 300,000 and 800,000 a day, or per strike actually.
It's about 300,000 per day.
Yeah.
But that might change depending on how we could do the other arrangements.
Yeah, and the BMA, this strike, have been applying significant pressure on the amounts that we offer staff to cover strikes outside the agreement we've made across Wales. So we are sticking to our guns as far as we can, but it's been increasingly difficult, hasn't it, Sarah?
Ewan?
Yeah, I don't know if this is better if we can until after the financial plan, but I mean, as I've raised before, I'm nervous about the financial plan, very nervous about where we are. And I know we've got in there that we're going to develop a route map and de-risk some of it, but I don't see that route back to balance at this moment in time. And I think we need a lot more detail around it before we can get to that plan. In terms of me, obviously, my next focus would be the finance piece of it. I think there's a bit of work to be done, to put it lightly.
Yes, there is.
Yeah.
By
Yeah, it's the fact that we haven't had a response back from Welsh Government as well, you know, that there is no plan B, as it were, at this moment in time. So yeah, I'm nervous about it. And I think there's a bit of work to, as I say, de-risk even next year's. You know, we've got 29 million in there promised for next year, but obviously we don't have that phasing at this moment in time, as far as I can see. Are we baked in the whole 29 million for saving for next year? So as I say, I'm nervous about what we can deliver.
Thank you.
Could I ask why we don't put in Plan B, which is what the 29 million pounds of cuts would effectively be, so that we've got Plan A, which is we can deliver over 3 years, or whether we've got Plan B, which is if we've got to cut, we've got to reduce services, we aren't able to evidence that. Any reason why we aren't able to do that?
Because I wouldn't endorse a Plan B that compromises patient safety or quality that at this point we've got on the table. So that's why at this point I haven't got a Plan B. So I think what we've put in there in the context of what we talked about is what we feel we can deliver with what we've got, with the ambitions we've got, with the line of sight we've got. We haven't got a Plan B that says, yeah, we can just shut while we're, I'm obviously not going to say that, by the way. But, if you come up with, we're going to just stop providing X services. So you could say we stop doing all planned care. We've then got a workforce you're not utilising, and more people in pain and people waiting longer. And I'm, as the chief executive and accountable officer, not prepared to put those proposals on the table at this point, when I think the ambitions we've set in the plan is that's what I want to spend the time on. I want to spend the time on driving efficiency. I want to spend the time on delivering the 29 million we have identified that we think we can, because that in itself will be quite a significant challenge for us. So I want to concentrate on the things that deliver the right quality and safety, has the right workforce impact, has the right financial impact, and there's evidence to support they are effective. And there's enough work for us to try to do that. And if we redirected our attention to come up with a plan B that I think you would be uncomfortable as a board making a decision on, and I certainly wouldn't be comfortable putting that proposal, I think it'll be an unhelpful distraction. And we've got to absolutely keep on the path we've got, but try to deliver more of it. You know, I want us to get better than what we've set up at this point. But at the minute, this is as a professional assessment of a line of sight of where we are now. So that's kind of where I want to put our efforts. So I'm worried. I'm worried with the number as well. But I also have got, whilst I've got a statutory responsibility around balancing, I've got professional accountability about all the other services and the safety issues. And this is our best assessment at this time. And I'm keen to work with others to try to push the ambition further.
I mean, the worry for me is the headline across the health force. You've been asked to do something by a balanced budget, and we will be an outlier unless everybody else is following the same path. And it'd be useful to get your views on where all other health boards are, because then if you're sitting in the minister's seat, it's, well, they haven't done it. We need to do something more then. I mean, I think all the reasons you've given are incredibly powerful reasons, and we need to make sure we've got all the local politicians, AMs, etc., on board with our journey over the 3-year period. But I just wanted to I think I think that you know, part of our responsibility is to hold to account, and we've got to be absolutely assured that the direction of travel is absolutely right. And I think if we get a message back from Welsh Government that actually that plan is not going to work, and I think maybe you should have a special meeting to then re-examine what we need to do to get there to avoid. My real concern is that the amount of time, energy and distraction and disruption that will be caused by further escalation to executive team members around this board would be totally and utterly disproportionate. That's my view.
And distracting.
Totally. And I think, you know, I think the unpicking of what you've said, Nicola, I can fully appreciate, understand, sympathise, empathise and agree with. But at the end of the day, I'm not making the decision. We've got to be able to persuade and make sure the argument is that we will deliver in 3 years. Because 3 years is a long time in life, never mind in politics. There's elections coming up and all sorts. We just need to be clear on that particular, you know, the mood music really coming back from Welsh Government about this, whether it's a sort of, yes, we know where you go, we understand that, we've got some sympathy, and actually we think, you know, your case is watertight, and you really evidence the superb work that all the team has done to put us in this position. And the plans, I have to say, Hannah, I think you've done a superb job with you know, putting all this together on the basis of you know, the requirements of our community. So, hope that's helpful.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you. Hang on, Rob and Hannah.
So in terms of Ewan's points, quite correct. This is a high risk plan. This is our best case number, best case, which does require us to deliver on the savings that have been put forward to a time frame to get that full value in. So for us, managerially, the challenge is acceleration and delivery. That's going to be a big challenge for us this year. In terms of, I'm not going to say much more about option B, but we have got plans going through a QIA, quality impact assessment process, which may not get the level of impact we want next year, but potentially would year after if there are things we want to progress. They will be more sensitive, and obviously they'll come back to the board. In terms of the question around others, I haven't got definitive numbers, but I don't believe we're going to be the only health board reporting a deficit as part of annual plans for next year. I won't say more than that because it'd be inappropriate because I haven't seen the final submissions, no. But I don't think we will be.
Do you want to add to that, Ewan?
Yeah, it's just to reiterate, I guess, you know, I fully support the fact, you know, given the position we're in, we are not going to balance this year unless we make some, you know, significant cuts in something, which I don't think any of us are in favour of at all. I think that longer term view is something, well, I certainly support that rather than anything else. But in order to support that longer term view, what I'm looking for again is that route map to get us there. And that's the piece that's the piece of the puzzle that's missing for me at the moment, is seeing what do we need to do, not even just next year, but the year after, because obviously to implement some of the things we want to implement, maybe we need to invest today. You know, maybe there's a cost to it today to get to that point we want to be in 3 years' time. And I guess the nervousness I've got then is when are we going to see that route map? I know it's in there for next year, but it's next year, April or next March again. You know, it's the next IMTP. You know, we had, you know, Welsh Government was in last year's IMTP, which said we would balance by the end of next year or the year after, whatever it was. We are now extending that by a year, which I'm sure would make them nervous. So it's when are we going to see that route map? When is that going to be back aboard so that we could say, yeah, we're comfortable with what we're going to do. If we are going to close somewhere or if we are going to change it, you know, when are we making absorbing those costs of when we're doing it? And maybe there's the challenge then, well, let's not do it in year 3, let's do it in year 2 or whatever it may be. And that to me would be the plan B kind of thing, rather than dramatic things now.
I think we've got to expect to have a short list of things we can bring forward if certain schemes fail or there is an obstacle in the way. You know, it's not particularly a plan B, but it's the contingency. You know, what are we going to do? Because if we agree to support in principle this plan, subject to the work that you have described having to take place, we certainly would need the assurance that there was work not just being done on getting through the next year, but basically what you could bring forward if something happened, so that we can get to 29 or is it 29 million savings. And it's going to be hard enough to do that. But, you know, I think the board's got to, and you've laid it out perfectly sensibly, the board has got to be in a position to help you and make those decisions with you. No. And it's work you'll have to do anyway for your, you'll want to do it yourself anyway. Yeah. Pippa and then Hannah.
I know that, you know, because I've sat around this table long enough that I don't think there's a person around here who isn't committed to continuous improvement. And it's something that I see, and I think the plan does reflect that. One of my points was going to be actually around that contingency about what do we have. It's not a plan B. It is about the revision of the plan, continuous revision of the plan A, to make sure that you are following that process of continuous improvement, so that you review and improve and review and improve. But if you do that, you may find that actually there are things you plan to do 2 years in advance that you suddenly find you're in a position to do now. So it's how do you have enough flexibility in the plan to be able to bring those things forward, but also about having the review points, enough review points in that can be brought before the planning committee, various committees and board, that we're not just sticking to this time scale, that we have all of that kind of agility within the plan, because I think we're going to struggle with it anyway, because it's such a big machine. But there's something for me about the amount of review points, how often it's brought back to us. I'm not asking for an answer on that right now, but just that I know it will be reviewed by execs all the time. But I think it's just a question of how often are we going to have that discussion in wider board involvement, to be able to help you and for you to be able to let us know how it's all going.
We'll have to do that every month, because we need to be in a position to help and make the decisions and really assess the progress that's being taken. So, you know, I would anticipate this has got to be discussed every month, because it's our key business, and we will have to take decisions based on, for example, the work of the efficiency board that's going on. That is almost in addition to this, and supplements some of the outcomes that we're able to achieve.
That's kind of what I anticipated.
Yeah.
But I didn't feel that it was stated.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for asking the questions. So we're all agreed on that. Hannah?
Yeah, just I think when I put my hand up, I think some of the comments have been made from Preseda, and I don't think it will be an outlier in terms of other organisations, but they'll obviously be going through the changes and iterating that that we've been doing as well. I think most boards are tomorrow. And yeah, it's that bit about the route map too. We've been focused on getting the granularity for this year, recognising we are submitting an annual plan. I think in terms of pulling the pieces together of the more significant changes, whether that be, touched on them in the plan, whether that be around some of the estate changes or service reconfigurations alongside the continuous improvement piece. I think we'll need to, I think I mentioned it in terms of how we keep a regular beat in the board sessions, and maybe we use one of the upcoming Rani for if there's an opportunity, any future board sessions where we sort of workshop some of that longer term route map stuff in terms of
that'd be helpful
together working through it. Because obviously alongside that we're developing the strategy. There's a number of strands that, because we've been focused on getting some granularity for year one, we probably need to sort of pause and make sense of. So what the gains from some of the digital developments, what, we've talked about some of the state priorities we'll see in there, the service areas, what's happening in the partnership space, the improvements in the upfront prevention. It's just bringing them together to, we haven't done it yet, so okay, so what? So what does year two look like at that macro level? So you're not seeing it because it's not there yet, that granularity for years 2 and 3. At the moment, it's a suite of areas and opportunities and options that do need further work up.
Okay, so when will we see? Sorry, I'm going to try and push for a date here, obviously, because what I want is comfort that something.
I'll pick up your point. So yeah, I think we picked it up in one of the previous board sessions. So the next quarter, we are going to do the work to try to map out that, and as we get into the financial plan, that kind of a bit more granularity around years 2 and 3. Because if you read it, there's a lot of narrative in there. There's a direction of travel around the money, and we need to tie those two together. So we try to map it out for you. And the numbers for efficiency and savings for the next 2 years are less than what we've done for the last 2 years. It doesn't feel like, and is in the ballpark of what you'd expect to be making as an annual kind of savings level. But I think the next 3 to 6 months, when we do the time, I would probably say July board. I'm going to look at Rob, but I think July board is probably reasonable for us to recognise. And I'm going to talk through the work we're going to do in the first quarter around some of the issues we've been looking at that we've set out. But that's kind of broadly where I'm thinking that by the July board, we're going to be able to set a bit more of that financial outlook for the next 3 years. The bit that I just want to re-emphasise, so we're a £1.6 billion organisation, just picking up Pippa's point. So we get a lot of variation on, 1 or 2 items can throw us off in different parts, in both directions. So that monthly monitoring is absolutely essential as part of our monthly financial reporting, our regular performance reporting, and it's absolutely vital. One of the things Rob and I have talked about is when at the end of this year, going back to last year's plan to say, okay, so how did it actually fall in the end after the year? Because it changes throughout the year. So let's look back. What assumptions did we get right? Which ones did we get wrong? Does that give us any more insight into the new year? We've done a lot of our financial plan, which we'll come to in a second, based on month 9, 10. Let's just test that once we've got the final year-end position again, in case that changes any of our assumptions. So we're quite keen to make sure that we tested our assumptions, given there's such big variables in some of it, that we are some are easier to predict than others. So that's work that we're going to do anyway. For the 3-year financial plan, as we said, we're now going to try and get a bit more granularity to that roadmap. We're going to need to do that anyway for ourselves. I'm sure we're going to need to do it to reassure Welsh Government that our plan has got a level of confidence in that, and as you said, for you as well and other board members.
The other things that we're going to do is we talked about, so we've got a delivery framework. We got a session tomorrow. We're going to hold the mirror up a bit to say, is this working as effectively as possible? Are there parts of our delivery framework we need to strengthen? Efficiency, as I mentioned, I think we need to have a more transparent reporting of efficiency and monitoring of it. So we're going to try to look at how we can do that better. You know, the work around, which Rob will pick up later, around delegation to the budget holders and our accountability framework, which we strengthened last year, about how do we make sure it's working effectively, and again, constantly review and test whether we've got this right. So they are kind of the things that we really want to focus on in the first quarter, recognising that we've got to this point with granularity on 24-25, but making sure we are as fit for purpose as possible to deliver it, and focus then on a better plan for the 3 years beyond this year, with a set of assumptions that we're going to have to make at some point in time. And so hopefully that's helpful in, you know, giving you some reassurance that the next quarter we're going to try and pick up these pieces of work that we are keen to do, and I'm sure we'll help give you a bit more assurance about the next 3 years.
Thank you. I think that's a very helpful statement that you've made.
You mentioned the 7th of April, Nicola. What's happening? Can I ask what's happening on that date?
The 9th of April is kind of our formal first meeting with Welsh Government around the targeted intervention on the financial finance and planning and the enhanced monitoring on urgent emergency care with Welsh Government colleagues.
Right, so will you begin any indication there about the direction of travel of our...
So obviously our financial plan, I'm sure, will be a key component of that discussion. And obviously we've been doing a lot of work on the urgent emergency care improvement plan, and we'll be sharing what we've done, and they'll be looking for a level of assurance, and then we'll be discussing the de-escalation criteria as part of that.
Okay.
We can do a report to the board.
Well, we've got a full briefing.
Yes, that'd be helpful, because I think we just, you know, I think we are looking at this in a methodical, reasonable, proportionate way, because obviously we know where we're going, we know how to get it, etc. And it's whether or not that level of mood music is accepted at the Welsh Government level, rather than not accepted. Because I mean, the reality is costs are escalating, wages will be increasing, the demand is exponentially increasing. And if you look at the report today from NHS England about people's view of the NHS, I think it was 91% said we support the NHS, but what they're not happy about is the level of activities. And I think actually what was, I think, quite useful in the discussion this morning was this is basically about post-COVID, 2 years really of work which wasn't able to be completed for an incredibly important reason. Now suddenly that is the level, and I think it's just again for the community to understand that we're in this position because of historical reasons, and that we are doing our level best to do what we can to do the best for all the patients in Gwent. And the plan that you have outlined, I think, is incredibly helpful to explain. We need a bit more explaining.
Yeah.
Thank you.
David?
So I think firstly, the report of the biennial plan, I think there's some really good bits in there, and some of the milestones and the measures will make it be easier for us to keep track of what's going on as we go through it. That's really good. The thing that makes me a little bit nervous is a lot of the work that we can do and the efficiencies we can make. They're relatively, they'll add up, but the things that will really make the big difference requires capital investment. So in order to take substantial chunks out of our revenue costs, we need investment in terms of new facilities that allow us to operate more efficiently, close down and demolish facilities that are costing us money to a significant amount of money to maintain, or big maintenance backlogs. We're going to need to reconfigure some of our estates so that we can move things together and into less locations. We need investment in digital technology and various other bits and pieces. All of those require significant capital investment, and they're the things that are going to take the massive chunk of our operational costs away. And capital investment is incredibly constrained, and we have very little of it. And there's very little in general available to NHS in Wales, very little available to Wales in general. So actually, a lot of our ability to get back to financial sustainability is reliant on an incredibly tiny pot of money, but we are bidding for alongside every other health board in Wales, alongside every other public sector organisation and local authority in Wales. And that's going to be really difficult for us to do over 3 years. It's also stuff that takes a long time. It's also stuff that we can't have a capital investment this year and make savings this year. It's stuff that's going to make a savings in 3, 4, 5, 6 years time. So it makes me a little bit, I'm just a bit nervous that the thing that's going to make a real difference to our financial stability is going to be very difficult for us to obtain and very hard for us to obtain. It's going to take a long time to deliver, even if we do it.
Yeah, that's why we've got to really maximise the more appropriate parts of our estate to the full. And because we're not going to get any capital, and that's something that's been highlighted to ministers as a very, very serious concern from boards in Wales. Really serious. Do you want to go on to finance?
I just had to
Yep.
comment. Spot on the comment. I think the challenge is for us to demonstrate why we would have a capital case. So if I use the Gwen example, because we were able to demonstrate significant revenue savings on the back of that investment, we were able to convince Welsh Government when they had some available funding to fund that. So again, that's the challenge back on us, isn't it? And I think also where we are able, if improved efficiency means less estate, is why the sense is required, then we can potentially look at reusing some of the facilities we already have. That's all part of the work that we need to progress now.
Yeah, I think the thing is even where we use it, we've got that still requires a whole lot of capital investment to reconfigure it to allow us to use it right, or to refurbish it so that it actually works. Because although we have a substantial amount of estate that we could use, we could keep using St. Willis, but the effort, but the amount of money we'd have to invest to bring that up to a decent standard that would allow us to keep it efficiently is substantial. So we're still going to require capital investment to do that, and that's the problem. Is there's very little capital available, which means that we're kind of fiddling around the edges without it. Yeah, that's going to be an ongoing problem.
Yes. Finance, briefly.
It feels like we've done it, but
Well, it doesn't feel like it.
but I will quickly go through the paper because it is important that all aboard appreciate and understand how the financial plan has been pulled together. So in terms of why we're doing and presenting and focusing on an annual plan, that's already been covered, I think, so I won't go back over that. In terms of how the plan's been pulled together, we've received funding of, or we're anticipating funding of £1.7 billion. So it's the 1.7 that we're using to effectively plan resources against. That's based on an uplift of 3.67% for all of Wales, which is a very positive uplift for us. It may not feel like that, but it is. In terms of the new discretionary funds, that means for us it's about £51 million. And the detail behind this has been provided previously in the allocation letter briefing. It does assume that we retain £65 million conditional funding, but that is in our allocation letter currently. And Welsh Government expect us to make at least a 2% savings. That's about 33 million. And the 33 million will be important in the context of what we talked about just now in terms of savings levels. The other thing about the 2% is we are only able to make savings against things that aren't ring fence or where we've had directed expenditure requests on us. So in effect, that's about 3% on where we've got discretionary funding. So that's worth noting as well. In terms of the overarching approach, and we've just touched on this a little bit, the financial plan focuses on making sure we've got safe services as a priority, and then looking at delivering balance through improved efficiency, reconfiguration, and minimising new investments. And the minimising new investments is going to be quite a challenge when we consider some of the demands on the service. So just to think about that headroom comment I meant earlier, we need to create headroom through every opportunity we have. In terms of the long-term recovery approach, just to reiterate what we talked about earlier, it's basically utilising new allocations in future years to deal with the new costs in those years, whilst delivering savings that reduce the underlying deficit we are facing. And what that means for us is broadly on an outline plan that's at the end of the document is around about 1.5% to 2% recurrent savings per annum need to be bottom lined into the underlying position to get us to recurrent balance. And I know we've had a long debate about how we do that. For me, the context of 1.5% to 2% savings per annum feels very feasible. There's a degree of confidence, but again, we do need that line of sight. Well, we won't repeat everything that's been mentioned. In terms of the requests in the paper, the 24-25 plan, based on service and workforce and savings plans identified so far, as well as opportunities, requests the board support a best case position and forecast going to Welsh Government as a £48.9 million deficit. So that's the ask for today. In terms of the makeup of the plan, there's a summary table there and it's detailed analysis throughout the paper. But broadly, we've got an underlying deficit of £81 million as our start point. That correlates with our current reported in-year forecast deficit, 23-24. And there's a table that describes how that £81 million is made up. There's two ways of doing an underlying analysis. One is very technical around recurrent and non-recurrent spend. And we've done that, and that's been presented to the Finance Performance Committee. But we've also included in this paper, probably more relevant, what is driving our underlying deficit. And the table describes there things like the non-recurrent funding used to utilise support workforce cost growth, including variable pay. Medical staffing cost increases, things like where we've had to implement investments in things like ED safer staffing and operational acuity requirements, which we talk about all the time. Nursing pressures, additional beds that will remain open for various reasons. CHC price inflation, again, has been reported comprehensively to the board during the year. Medicines management, again, not just prescribing, but also acute and high cost drugs. That's quite a significant element for us, particularly cancer related. Some of the estates and facilities costs we've had to, we thought we'd be able to take down in year and we haven't been able to. That's driving our underlying position currently. And then in terms of specialised services, WISC and ESC, they're consistently costing or requiring investment from the Health Board in excess of funded levels. So that's what drives the £1 million deficit as a start point. If anybody wants more information on that, we can provide lots and lots of information, but hopefully that's a sort of recognised list of things that people will be aware of from previous review. We've then got new cost pressures, which come to about £60 million, split between national cost pressures, where we've effectively got to reflect things that are affecting every health board. So say nice cost pressures, things related to COVID, particularly around antiviral drugs, where they were previously paid for through Welsh Government. We've now had to pick that up. Office 365 is a national investment. And some of the reduction that Welsh Government has taken off in the COVID health protection elements are impacting us this year. But inflationary macroeconomic pressures, various different types of inflation hitting us there. Specialised services is the big one. The pass-through of the 3.67% you have to do for our contracts, quite a significant one. That's been directed to us. And then the operational cost in inflationary things like CHC, energy and general inflationary and other pressures. We then got contractual and unavoidable pressures, which again are things that we've previously signed up to or we recognise that we really need to reflect in the financial plan through from previous investment agreements with things like Velindre, cancer care, our CHC and FNC growth levels, and things like prescribing costs that we obviously need to recognise, but also there's opportunities for medicine management here as well. And then local investment priorities. There's very few of these, and most have been recognised previously through discussions, things like our health and wellbeing centres, where we've got capital investments, and then there's costs generally through things like increased facilities costs that we need to pick up. These sort of issues are where the estates plan for the future may mitigate. Things like the Royal Breast Unit, the extension of ED. We've got certain proposals that are shown gross in here, but will have offsetting benefits, things like Primary Care Academy, Primary Care Sustainability Model, which effectively generates a much more controlled support package for managed practices, which will drop off in the future, and investment in a surgical robot, which we will be supporting through a disinvestment with other NHS providers. And then we've got core service requirements, things like cardiology and sourcing to deal with diagnostic waiting times, litigation costs that we're seeing increase. And then we've identified an innovation reserve of £3 million. There was £10 million in 23-24. So as you can see, it's been reduced significantly to focus on high-level priorities that we feel we need to recognise and consider in the year. MS drugs, we talked about Favipiravir case previously, diabetes pumps, and other pressures that may emerge. That 3 million, and depending on how we use it, is the only contingency in the plan. A large part of it is earmarked, so just to make people aware of that. The paper identifies some summary levels because of the different cuts for cost growth areas of CHC, medicines management, and WISC. In terms of savings opportunities, we've talked about the 29 million and the further opportunities being identified. The paper describes the full year effect of savings being brought forward from last year. There's an analysis of the savings of the 29 million over the different value and sustainability themes and by division. Again, a full list of all the 29 million has been shared with Finance Performance Committee. So if others want that list, just give me a call and happy to share that. Our opportunities pipeline. So these numbers, 6.9 and the 4.5 being amber opportunities and red opportunities, are being counted to achieve our best case forecast. So this is where the risk comes into the plan. We've assumed that we will deliver all the amber opportunities, and we've assumed we will deliver about 2/3 of the red opportunities. And this is where the acceleration and delivery is required. We've also got, I say, just over £6 million financial proposals going through a quality impact assessment process, which we have not included in our forecast position. And anything that comes through that during the year, we're going to be de-risking the savings plans and supporting it that way. If we're in a very fortuitous position and all our savings and opportunities are delivering, and obviously any favourable impact of these proposals will support bottom line improvement. In terms of medium and long term, and I suppose this comes to the 3-year recovery plan, there's included a list of areas that we feel are going to be certainly the priority areas we're going to look at to convert into the proposed 3-year plan to recovery. So through the bed-based reviews, looking at the acute medical model, 6 goals, rationalisation opportunities, ambulatory care review for effectiveness, estates rationalisation, TQM, PFI, things we'd be familiar with and we'll talk about later on. general efficiency and consideration, again, through efficiency of what do we do more of versus what do we take costs out of. And that's quite a complicated thing to work through, because it may be that efficiency costs us nothing, or actually doing more could cost us a lot. And then you've got the question of, we might want to take costs out, but can we, if we've got employed staff, for example, delivering a service? So the so that does need a bit more sensitivity in terms of analysing the opportunities there. Pathway redesign will support that efficiency agenda as well. Focusing on core service delivery, I think, is important, and this is where potentially we need to look at where we are delivering low clinical value interventions, or again linked to health pathways where we've got steps in pathways that are not required. So things like SOS and PIFU for outpatients, where patients initiate an outpatient appointment is part of the improving the value-based care approach, but also pathway improvements, things like that. Primary care sustainability through the management framework, and we reflected some of that in the numbers already. Variable pay, again, continues to be high, so the ongoing rollout of initiatives around that. However, we probably dealt with most of the variable pay savings through policy change. We now need to recognise how variable pay comes out from service redesign, bed closures, things like that, and then digital opportunities as well. One of our challenges will be, and Nicola picked this up earlier, clarity on how we capture the benefits of this work and how we capture them from a financial perspective to understand how they're landing in the financial plan going forward. Financial risks have been listed. The most significant, I think, is the delivery of the savings we are seeing or anticipating. Industrial action, as James has alluded to, if that keeps going into the new year, that will be problematic given the current cost per day that we're looking at. And obviously, potentially identifying new savings to support and mitigate the plan as necessary. And mentioned before, haven't you, that looking at savings, looking at improvement is a continuous process. What the plan does is provide a checkpoint for us. In terms of the medium term, again, we talked about the detail behind this. At this point in time, the table just reflects over 3 years recurrent savings of, as I mentioned, between 1.5% and 2% should be deliverable to support our underlying deficit. Our challenge in that is to make sure our underlying deficit doesn't get worse. And we're assuming 81 is the start point and we continually improve against to make that point. And as just been picked up, Q1 will be when we develop in proposition and proposal, come back to the board. The overall plan in more detail has been presented to the Finance and Performance Committee. The board is asked to approve the submission to Welsh Government of the 48.9 million deficit forecast, recognising risks and opportunities for further mitigation. I would also ask around the table if there's any questions, because it is really important that everybody understands what is in this plan. Happy to take questions and, if necessary, forward to. Thank you.
Phil?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Interesting discussion sitting here, kind of home alone listening to it. I think Nigel Kennedy always says to really appreciate the music, you have to be in the room. And I'm not in the room, and you get a different kind of context around it all. But I have to say, I am feeling it, even though I'm sat here at home. To ask a couple of questions around the finance paper. The first question, I'm a little bit confused, but I think I've read in it that Welsh Government may have changed their funding formula in terms of how they're allocating any resource that might be available. And I wonder whether we could have some clarity around that, because that is quite significant if that is the case. And then turning to the some of the cost pressure, the one that concerns me the most, I guess, is the CHC spend. I mean, CHC can be a real monster to control, but if it runs away with you, we could be in a position where we are working hard to save money in all kinds of areas, only for it to be consumed in continuing healthcare. And I know a few years ago, we were a very significant outlier in terms of our continuing healthcare spend. And then we looked at it and really got a grip of the budget. We managed to reduce it very significantly. And I guess what has happened with it is that during COVID, we perhaps taken our foot off the brake a little bit and it's run away with us again. And some of the arguments for the cost pressures, I'm not quite sure that they stack up. I mean, this real living wage issue, for example. I mean, one of the big issues with the continuing healthcare, the reason why it costs more money is because we were providing care for people with more complex needs who needed more highly trained people to care for them, and therefore they were never paid the minimum wage anyway. So to say that the real living wage is pushing it, I'm not sure that in any sense that holds water. But it would be good to look at that. I mean, maybe there's a relativity argument in there because you pay people at the bottom more money, people at all the other tiers go up as well. I don't know, maybe that is the issue, but I'd like a little bit more clarity around that. And also to know where are we in Wales now in terms of continuing healthcare spend? Are we in the pack or are we getting to be an outlier again? Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Phil. So in terms of the allocation formula, they haven't changed the allocation formula, but when the allocation formula was reset a few years ago, they manage it on growth. So when there's national growth, they'll apply the formula to that, which is why in the paper identify we're not quite getting the percentage that we would do if we were starting from the whole quantum of funding for NHS Wales. So hopefully that answers that question. In terms of CHC, you are right. We can do lots and lots of work in other areas, and certain areas, be it CHC, be it drugs, that can be an anomaly for us, can undermine an awful lot of good work that's been done. So all I can do is reflect back to you that yes, we do have some external factors that really can cause us a problem, and that's just part of the working issues, operational issues we need to work through. And they are risks and uncertainties to a degree beyond our control. In terms of CHC itself as an outlier, I would say in the last 3 to 4 months, we've seen some phenomenal impact on the work done by the team to improve the financial position through looking at operational arrangements, assessments and things like that. So we're hoping that will benefit us and continue into the new year. Some of that will be non-recurrent because there's been a catch-up exercise. But yeah, quarter 4 for 23-24, I see some really good work emerging. In terms of it, the inflation levels for next year, we have gone through that in detail, and we are linked to a degree with where local authorities apply their uplifts, and local authority uplifts have been quite significant again in 24-25. So our approach to a costing mechanism, I'll use the word, it avoids us getting into a pricing debate individually with homes, and we've got a basis of and methodology that supports our level of uplift to keep continuing healthcare providers liquid, if you like, because part of the challenge is paying the right amount, but also making sure that we keep the market afloat. I'm sure you appreciate that. In terms of real living wage, this one's an anomaly. So on the basis of should we be funding and supporting real living wage through our care providers, yes, we should, and we do continue to. However, across Wales, the funding for the real living wage to health boards has been reclarified to throughout Wales. And that's resulted in this in 23-24, a resetting of what the interpretation of the funding to us to pass on is actually based on as a formulaic approach and methodology. we, as well as a few of the other big health boards, have been interpreting our funding levels in an inconsistent way. So for 23-24, Welsh Government, and this has only happened in the last 2 months, in 23-24, Welsh Government have identified a working group and gone through that, and they have honoured our financial commitments and assumptions around anticipated income, because our anticipated income levels have been the same since 22-23. So there has been a delay in that clarification. That does mean, so they're happy to honour that commitment 23-24. Going into 24-25, they've clarified the interpretation for all health bodies across Wales, and that's where that financial hit has hit us. So it's not that we're not paying it, we are paying it, but we're not now going to get the level of funding that had been anticipated previously. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense as far as it goes, Rob, but I guess there's still a weakness in the argument for me that we were probably already paying it anyway in terms of CHC rates. And I just wonder whether it's an argument that's being used twice, really. I mean, we were.
Sorry. Okay, so you mean for the actual fee we pay?
Yes.
To CHC providers.
Yeah, absolutely. Because there would have been I would have thought the providers who were paying their staff at the old minimum wage anyway, to look after some of those, or the majority of the CHC patients, would have been fairly minimal. Because we would, I mean, if you look at what we pay for CHC, it's significantly higher than what you would pay for a patient that wasn't categorized in the CHC kind of level. So the rates were already inflated. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, so in terms of, we touched on this the other day, actually, so I'm able to answer it. In terms of our verification, if you like, about rates of pay to staff, there is a required declaration from providers to confirm they are paying real living wage levels on top of the fee level or as part of it. So we don't think there's a duplication. What we're not able to do is, due to data protection and personal information issues, actually ask staff if they are getting paid a particular rate to try and audit that. But in terms of, if you like, the governance and check, the mechanisms put in place should avoid duplicate payment being made.
Okay, I guess what this discussion reinforces for me is that we really do have to manage CHC at a micro level and actually drill down at a micro level on a case-by-case basis, which I'm sure the teams are now doing. And it's interesting that we've made such improvement in the last quarter, which basically shows the difference you can make when you do manage it that way.
You want to add something, Leanne?
Yes, please, just very quickly, I think sort of for assurance. So I oversaw a deep dive personally in the last couple of weeks, Phil, looking at the top 10 high level packages for each of the areas of CHC that we've currently got running. I know that Welsh Government have undertaken sort of an independent review as well, and the feedback that we've had from Welsh Government is actually the benefits or improvements that they've seen in other health boards off the back of that independent review didn't come to fruition, I think, sort of locally for us, suggesting that some of our processes were better than elsewhere. The last formal benchmarking as part of that review was 1920, I think. So we have agreed that we would want to participate in revised benchmarking more up to date, because I think having a reference point that is that many years ago, I think particularly pre-COVID, is irrelevant to us. But I think just for assurance, that scrutiny in particular on the high cost packages is being done at the highest level, and the teams are being pushed to scrutinise every package that's made, as well as put in place alternative pathways for some of these individuals. So a patient pathway panel has got in place in mental health as well. I think there's a lot of work to do with our local authority partners on some of those placements also. There's a specific case in family and therapies. We'll be talking as an executive team tomorrow. I think what that actually would benefit both local authority and health, I think, if we put in place different processes. So more opportunity, lots of work, I think, sort of to build on, but an absolute focus and scrutiny on that particular spend because of the impact that it has for us.
Yeah, well, thanks very much, Leanne. That is very reassuring. It's just that I've seen it so many times in the past that clinicians, for example, can work so hard to control expenditure and it can be just wiped away and continue in healthcare overnight. So I think this is a really serious part of the spend profile.
Thank you.
But anyway, you
Ewan?
seem to have a good grip on it anyway.
Well, Ewan?
Yeah, I guess I'm just going to come back to my nervousness now around, obviously we've discussed the 3-year plan and how we get back to a balanced budget, but it's the how close we are on some of these figures just for this year. Obviously, we're reporting a 50 million deficit in the current year, or around about 50 million current year. To get back to that 50 million deficit for next year, which is what we have in the plan, we've obviously got to deliver 30 million of savings that we think we are pretty much in the bag on, but we don't have a phasing around. So we're taking a full year benefit of those savings. And then we've got 11 million of additional opportunities that are in there that we're not even that sure about, or we're getting there in terms of planning those. And then on top of that, as James mentioned earlier, the odd strike here and there could really derail us in terms of these plans. So this is another figure I'm incredibly nervous about.
Thank you. I think we're all incredibly nervous about it. Okay, the third issue is the revenue budget delegation.
So can I confirm that the board's happy to go with the best case plan, recognising the risks?
Oh, the board appreciates that this is work in progress. And we note the ambition to make improvements, bearing in mind the environment that we have at the moment with rising demand and the lack of capital and the pressures on the staff. In terms of the plan itself, what are the views? What do you want to do? What is the legal thing that we've got to? Have we actually got to approve or support in principle?
This is an IMTP that we're going to submit as a board to Welsh Government.
Yeah.
So the board needs to be content with what we're submitting.
Yeah. Are we content to support in principle? Or do we have to formally approve it?
I think it's got to be an approved plan of the board that is submitted. It's got to be a board plan.
Yeah. So what's the difference between supporting in principle and approve?
I guess it's not in principle. I guess it's the clarity on the bit.
Well, we have said that further work needs to be done. You have said further work needs to be done. Everybody appreciates further work needs to be done. I mean, so now we've got to get through the next year. That's when it's critical.
Yeah, I just want to, so every time anybody's ever put an INTP or an annual plan, there's always work to do. It's never completely bottomed out. I've never in my whole career seen a plan that's in the bag on the 1st of April. There's always a level of, elements of savings plans that are kind of confident. There's always a level of risk. There's, further opportunities to pursue. There's risks that are identified in the plan. This time last year, we approved a 3-year plan, which had 112 million forecast deficit. Didn't have the clarity of the milestones I think we've got this time. Didn't have as much of the savings with the level of confidence that we've got this year. So I had a lower financial risk. And I think we've been able to set out assumptions which shows a bit more of a line of sight to the 3 years than we did this time last year. So from my perspective, yeah, there's work to do, but I feel much more confident in us having a grip on the plan going into next year than I definitely did last year with a 112 million deficit. We had a 50 million ambition around savings, which we knew when we set it in the plan, our ambition, because we absolutely got to demonstrate our ambition given the financial context we were working in. So my issue is, yeah, as plans go, I'm nervous about parts of it. Ultimately, but I'm less nervous than I was going into last year. So I suppose it's understanding, what would it take for the board to feel comfortable to approve it? Another option is we
take some of the risk out of the plan, but would be going in with a higher figure to say, we think there's opportunity. Yeah, so for me, from the conversation that we've had, it's more about that there's a risk in the plan around ambition. So you take that ambition out and you go in with a higher figure of 60 million, which I think we'll have a greater challenge from Welsh Government on. So you know, without understanding what else we could do at this point in time to get an approved plan, given what we've signed off previously, that I suppose that's the question I pose.
So what?
I think for me, it's around approval whilst noting our continued interest in the changes that might occur or so I think there's something for me about how we note that we are, it would be wrong of us, wouldn't it? It would be wrong of us to approve it and say it's all approved and now we don't want to look at it again. That would be a wrong thing to do, and that's not what anybody is suggesting. And so I think for me, it's just a question of making sure that when we approve it, that because it's about our due diligence, isn't it, moving forward? And so for me, it's about just being clear about what that really looks like, which is it's exactly what everybody has been saying around the table. So I'm not suggesting anything contentious, but it's about how we make sure that it's minuted, to be clear to everybody who reads the minutes. That's all.
Well, basically then, I think the semantics between supporting in principle and approving are very minor, but we would, are we content to say that we approve it in principle, but we would wish to receive, because this will acknowledge that there is further work to be done, as you have rightly pointed out. We obviously appreciate that further work needs to be done on the route map to sustainability over the 3-year period and the timescales when it is hoped and planned that we will achieve this. Would that help in terms of the approval?
But I think there's nothing wrong with saying that, you know, the plan is approved, but the further work is recognised to do particularly the 3-year, the roadmap to sustainability, which is at a very high level set out in the plan, but a greater level of granularity is needed. Right. So I think that's unreasonable as an acknowledgement of further work that's required.
That's right. Are we content? Bill, have you got your hand up?
Yeah, probably don't need to say it now, Anne, but I was going to say that we need to improve it and not put the in principle word in. I mean, I think we have to get behind it as a board. I mean, I think we send in a bit of a weak message to Welsh Government if we say, well, we approve it in principle and we're not quite sure on all those other things. I mean, I don't think we've ever approved a plan without risk. There's risk in this plan. It's positive as far as it goes, and I think we need to get behind it and say, yeah, we approve it and we are going for it.
Okay.
First review.
Fine. Thank you. Are we content with that? Yep. Right. What's next? Corporate parenting.
The budget paper.
Oh God, go on then. I'm fed up.
Okay, so I'll be as quick as I can on the budget paper because we've sort of touched on a lot of the issues. Board is required to set budgets for next year aligned with the financial plan. That's part of our requirements. The paper describes how the £1.7 billion funding will be delegated, and considering the deficit forecast and savings and opportunities proposed, a 2-stage process is proposed. So budgets must be set on income levels. So our overall budget plan has got to match our overall assumed resources available. So as a deficit is in the forecast, consideration needs to be given determination of where deficits will be allocated for budget and reporting purposes. So for example, in 23-24, we established a negative budget reserve to the full amount on the basis that all delegated budget holders should be living within their budgets to achieve financial balance. That allowed clear reporting and allowed us to see where deficits were emerging against the plan. In terms of 24-25, we may choose to look at that in a different way, potentially set control totals and leave budgets as an overspending position, but against a control total as an option. So while those considerations are being worked through, particularly around allocation of costs and funding in the round of the overall financial plan, the proposition in the paper outlines the income assumptions around the 1.7 billion, what's confirmed, what's anticipated, budget setting principles, the fact that we have a budget control procedure and accountability framework. And the methodology suggested for stage one is that we delegate budgets based on current rollover budgets in our budget setting system, and that will be based on month 11, 23, 24. So there's a significant level of our funding already delegated, and that'll be signed off. The 3.67% interim NHS agreements pass through will be delegated. An innovation reserve for £3 million be established, and then holding a balance of approximately 35 million in reserves until we work out through the stage 2 process by the end of Q1, where those delegations will sit, and then budget delegation letters will be issued on that basis. That's as quick as I can do it.
Thank you. Are we content with that statement and recommendation? Pippa?
I just have one brief question, and it's about the JCC and whether that's going to alter the amount of money with risk and ease. Do we not know, or?
So we've got a WISC plan that has now been agreed by VC last week. So we're now assuming that to go through on that basis.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, are we content? Yep. Thank you. Corporate parenting.
And hopefully a slightly lighter subject.
I don't think so.
Well, it's positive in the fact that we can make a difference. So corporate parenting obviously is the collective responsibility of local authorities to safeguard children and young people who are care experienced, which is the term we use these days. But the corporate parenting charter has been supported by NHS Wales and Welsh Government, and they've been supporting health boards to sign up to the charter and to sign up to the approach to recognising the needs and life chances of care experienced children and young people. This is really about developing our awareness and responsibilities towards those children. Just for context, as of the 18th of March, we had 1,645 looked after children in Gwent. There are 7,210 in Wales, and that's up 22.5% from 2013. So this is a growing group of children and young people, and 23% of the children in Wales who are in care actually reside in Gwent and are a Gwent responsibility. So for us, this is important. So the Charter aligns to the UN Convention for Rights of the Child. So we've put the articles in the paper for you, so you'll be able to see those. And within the assessment, we've identified the actions we need to take to further embed the Charter within everyday business within the Health Board. One of the things that we are proposing to do, and thank you to Shelley for highlighting this, is that the training for board members as part of their induction on responsibilities around care experienced children is not in place. So we will pick that up as part of our board training process and our part 2. As you know, we've got to come back and do part 2 safeguarding training with the board. We'll also look to embed this in the QIA process, so our quality impact assessment process. So making sure that we're understanding if any service change has an impact on this group of children and young people. So there's nothing further I'd like to say, Anne, apart from the fact I would commend this to you and to the signing of the Charter. The work will be taken forward by my safeguarding team, who have a leadership role in care experienced children, but also the looked after children's team that's within family and therapies.
Thank you very much, Jenny. It's a really, really important piece of work and a real commitment to the children of Gwent, which is vital for us in our future. Are there any questions? Are we all content to support this wholeheartedly? What? Oh. Yeah, Bill.
Yeah.
Did we
yeah,
miss
just,
you?
Sorry, just to say, yeah, really support this. Great to see this. I mean, what this is doing really is extending the whole notion of corporate parenting, certainly across the public sector and wider than that. one of the most challenging areas, I think, for looked after children or looked after young people or care experienced young people, as we're now going to refer to them, is when they try and enter the world of work. And on that, I just think if we look at the enormity of employment opportunities the public sector offers in Gwent, I wonder whether we ought to be referring this, if they're not already going to look at it, to the PSB, whether they could look at this specifically about how we can look at offering work opportunities to looked after children. It's similar to our volunteer to career kind of ideas that we talked about earlier on. If we can extend that to looked after children, then I think that would be very beneficial, because many looked after children, because they've experienced care services, they often have an interest in working in them. But the world of work to a looked after child can be very, very difficult, because it happens at a time when most of the statutory agencies are starting to withdraw their support. And I know the legislation is trying to deal with that, but it hasn't really dealt with it in reality. So I think this would be a good PSB discussion about how we can help looked after children into work. And in many respects, it's right in the middle of the Marmite stuff anyway.
Yeah. I think, yes, Penny, and I'll come. I can deal with the PSB first.
Yeah. Do you want to?
No, carry on.
I just agree with Phil. I've come, I work in an organisation where this is deeply embedded and has been for many years, and I've been chair for a number of years. And it's incredibly important that we recognise how each of us have a responsibility throughout the organisation, from top to bottom and round. And I think it's really good that this is happening now, and that we're going to have, we ourselves are going to be updated with training. And it's something that is deeply embedded, but I've just wondered if perhaps you could work with local authorities, for instance, because they are so aware of what's going on. And Phil said about going into work and helping them. We actually have PAs who are have 16 to 18-year-olds or young care leavers or whatever leaving, and they will help and guide them through the work process or the education process. We've had some real successes. So there are people out there, there are ways we can help. So let's get together with areas of good practice and go ahead from there.
Thank you, Penny. That's very helpful.
My safeguarding team, I'll talk a little bit in the quality report about the work they do, because they have tentacles across a broad range of areas, but they work very closely with the looked after children's team and the local authorities on this through the Gwent Safeguarding Board. And I think, Phil, your point about PSB and transition is really important, because we have opportunities as statutory bodies to help people into employment, particularly where their life chances haven't been the same as other comparable children in our population. So I think there are real opportunities, and I think if we get it right for this group of children, it's really important to their future.
Sarah? And undertaking access routes for looked after children is an agreed programme of work now in terms of our action plan with the Gwent Workforce Board. So in conjunction with our local authority partners, we've started to work up a pilot with Newport Local Authority in particular. We're having some teething issues around the sharing of data and sharing of information. But this is something that we would be, if there was a wider discussion, we'd be keen to share some of our early experiences in trying to get this off the ground and how we can work collaboratively to unlock some barriers. That would be really helpful.
Thank you. So are we content to support the signing of the pledge to become a corporate parent? Thank you. And we'll refer the issue to the PSB to see what action they would collectively like to take. Okay, thank you. And thank you, Jenny, for that. Strategic equality review.
Thank you, Chair. There are two reports set out under this item. The first report is our annual equality report, which sets out any improvements we've made in relation to our requirements under the public sector equality duty, and also our requirement to publicise information regarding the diversity of our workforce. There's some highlights in terms of improvements contained in the cover paper, particularly over the last 12 months. We've made some improvements in being able to collect equality data from our staff, and we've also seen a reduction in the gender pay gap. Some of you may note that usually around this time of year we consider the gender pay gap report. We have uploaded all of the required information as needed in terms of our legal duty, but the wider report will come to the next board, just to add that. In terms of highlights, we've also worked on the governance framework around our staff diversity networks and making sure that they're supported. And we've agreed as an executive team to facilitate those with sponsors and also support protected time. We've confirmed our anti-racist action plan. We've also been able to grow our equality team and also done work in terms of supporting our internationally educated nurses and medical graduates as well, which is contained within them. And it's really fantastic that the report is able to highlight the dedication, experience and skills of all our teams and all of our staff across the Health Board in terms of the Spotlight On section, which particularly links well with the presentation from Tanya, Catherine and Letitia this morning. Non-Eris, our equality leaders, joined the call if there's any questions to ask. The particular thanks to Non and colleagues, in particular around Tracy and Jenny's teams for helping us compile the report, but also progress the actions over the last 12 months. So that's the first report which the board is asked to approve in Redfield's application by the end of this month. The second,
can we do with that first?
Yeah.
Are there any comments?
Just great to see the progress.
Yeah, quite. Paul?
On page 226, I'm looking at the it's only 3% of the organisation identifying as having a disability. Would that be?
No, I think that's a 3% improvement in our record keeping. Yeah.
Right.
So we've gone in the right direction in terms of encouraging staff to.
So that's 3% improvement.
3% improvement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The wording looks a bit.
Yeah. Apologies.
Right.
It's okay. Okay. So we're happy to approve that.
You're welcome. Yeah.
The plan.
And the second, so the annual plan that we've just gone through, that will be reflecting our strategic equality plan 2020 to 2024. So we're in a new period of moving forward with the strategic equality plan. Non has very diligently facilitated extensive engagement and consultation within the Health Board and externally with our partners and stakeholders. I was fortunate enough to attend some of the events which were very positive. The plan has also been developed noting that we've had a change in context in our landscape, you know, the impact of COVID since 2020, really exposing inequalities within our communities, and also various pieces of legislation and guidance from Welsh Government and also good practice. The plan really focuses on 3 core elements which we will hang our objectives on, and we've determined this to be the 3 Ps. So patients, particularly looking at access for patients to our services, people, which has an impact in terms of diversity of the workforce, and population, considering health inequalities. We've also taken some learning from the previous plan, and as you will see within the report, there's a high-level action plan which will help us determine where we're going and how we're going to get there. And also we have started to determine some measures in terms of how will we make sure that we can keep an eye on our progress and evidence that progress in a well-informed way. And there's still some work for us to do on the measures, for some examples of what that will look like is outlined in the cover paper. And again, thanks to Non and colleagues, again, particularly in Jenny and Tracy's team, supporting the development of the plan. So once again, board is asked to approve the full new direction of travel moving forward.
Thank you, and thank you very much for all the hard work that's been put into developing this plan, which is comprehensive, easy to understand, and hopefully sound to implement. Pippa?
Yeah, that's the first thing I wanted to say is I'm really impressed with the plan, just the same as the annual report. It's great to see the amount of work that's gone on. And I've really only got one comment, and it ties a little bit into the volunteering role. I was struck the other day actually by, if you park in the car park at the Royal Gwent, for example, and you're an independent wheelchair user, you can't get to outpatients because of the slope. But of course, if you go in through the main entrance, unless you've got one of these badges, you can't actually get from one side of the building to the other very easily. And there isn't very much in the way of direction to help you do that. And I guess it brought some thoughts to mind about the accessibility of our environment, of how people navigate to get from one place to another. With the shortest route, for example, if you don't walk very well, you know, just about how you navigate this space, and whether or not we could tie that into our volunteer programme to actually recruit a number of volunteers who can't walk very well, or perhaps use wheelchairs, or have visual impairment or hearing impairment, and could we use them in order to increase the ability for the population to access our environment? So there was something kind of that struck me about Action 1 here, but also the fact that we'd had this volunteer story as well. It brought the two things together in my mind, and I just thought I'd like to raise them.
That's a really good opportunity. If my memory serves me correctly, I'm sure we used to have volunteers, particularly at the Gwent site, kind of helping people to find their way around. And I think that was impacted as a result of COVID. But I think that's a good idea, and I'll link with Jenny and Tanya.
There is a man at the desk, but what he actually says to you is, if you want to go to outpatients, you have to go out the main entrance and around and up the slope. So that's the direction that he was given. Now, of course, that's just one person and it's one example. But I was thinking much more broadly about the environment of all of our hospitals.
And making improvements.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, David.
Just to tie that into what we've seen in the report this morning, but one of the concerns around wayfinding in especially Ystrad Fawr, and we've heard that a couple of times via PQSOC and some of the other board papers over the last year. But wayfinding and finding your way around our hospitals is not as easy as it should be, and I think we should try and link. There's ways of linking this up and using knowledge and experience from real life in how we improve our wayfinding.
Absolutely. Yes, thank you.
Just respond on that. So I completely agree. And one of the things I feel quite strong about is the front of house, recognising they won't necessarily all be there 24 hours, but most of our sites have got that kind of front reception that help people find their way around the hospital as well. But the Royal Gwent is a particular concern for me because of its layout. St Willows in terms of Casnewydd in particular, Mayndiff Court where there's still some, so there's probably 3 or 4 hotspots that particularly I think we've got to address in addition to that wider, and I think your volunteer is a really good idea, which I know we've had before but I think lost, so we pick that up as well. But I'm really keen to make sure there's a kind of consistent offer on all of our main sites.
Good, thank you. Paul?
I'd just say huge thanks for the document. I think it reads incredibly well, and the 3 Ps I think particularly with the patients, people and population, and I think it's incredibly important what you listed in there about the co-production and co-design involving patients, and the patient voice is embedded in this. So just to say, very well done.
Thank you.
Okay. Again, thank you very much for the report and the plan. Obviously, it's a fairly ambitious plan. There's lots of actions there. I just wondered whether you think you actually have the resources to be able to deliver, or is it more in training other people within divisions to also help and support you to do that?
I think one thing I've spoken about with Jenny and Tracy, and I know Non is picking this up with colleagues, is once we've got on and we've been able to grow our team over the last 12 months, we know that there are other people working on this agenda across the health board. So I think we're beginning to see the green shoots of pulling those resources together in a very informed way, especially around some of the work Tracy's doing in terms of inequalities and helping with the framework around that. So it is very much around linking in with those individuals and linking in with our own staff volunteers that come forward, and you know, this is everybody's business. It is ambitious, and we will work towards improvements in a measured way. But you know, I think we've taken some great steps forward, and also by supporting protected time for people who are facilitating our staff networks. You know, that has really been well received, and growing those networks and the ability to reach out to everybody to deliver this agenda will be really important.
Thank you. Thank you. Any further questions? None?
Thank you, Chair. Just to add, going back to Pippa's comment around accessibility and working with volunteers, we have started to work with our person-centred care team, and in line with the 3 Ps of inclusion, we are establishing what we're calling people participation panels. We're looking to do a pilot with ED and minor injuries to look at accessibility needs in that area as a pilot, using people with lived experience as experts. So we're hoping some tangible outcomes will come from that piece of work that will inform some of that. We're also investigating the use of some apps that help navigate and map out hospital sites, and we're pulling together a business case for that currently. So just to assure board that the work is underway.
Thank you very much, Noel. That was helpful. So are we happy to approve the plan?
Yeah.
Yes. And thank you all very much for the hard work that's obviously evident within this plan. And we will be receiving regular updates on its effectiveness. So thank you, Noel. Thank you. 3-4, the major incident plan.
Thanks, Chair.
Plans after plans.
Yeah. Yeah, happy to present this updated major incident plan. Is for approval today at the board. Just to note, the plan has already gone through the Population Health Planning and Partnerships Committee. Yeah. So just very briefly then, obviously the category 1 responder under the Civil Contingencies Act, it's really important that our major incident plan is kept updated, not just the plan, but that it's we train people on it and we exercise it. And there is a requirement that we update every 3 years. So the last time the plan was updated was when the Grange opened. So it's really timely in terms of the time since the Grange opened, but also ensuring the plan reflects the learning from the Kerslake report post the Manchester Arena bombing. So those changes and improvements have been made to the plan. There has been wide engagement on developing the plan and the underpinning action cards. I can give you assurances on that. I guess what I touched on already in terms of robustness of the plan, it's that exercising of it, and we have a exercise on this plan planned for June, where we're already actively planning. Using, I can't remember when the date is, but we're using, information from a real day rather than all sort of contrived information, pulling from all our data sources. I think Leanne's deputy is keen to be gold command for that day. So the planning for that is underway, which again, no doubt we'll have some learning, probably less so on the overarching plan, although there may be, but in the detailed action cards that colleagues have and bring into life when a major incident is triggered. So that's all I was going to say on the plan. I'm just happy to take questions.
Thank you, Helen. Helen?
Just a quick question. How do you ensure that the people on the ground who've actually got to deliver this plan actually know about it? Because obviously staff in so many different roles change quickly and pass on. And
Yeah. Thanks, Helen. That's a really good question. We've established or re-established, I think, since COVID, an internal EPRR, so emergency preparedness, response and of the other arm. Should do from that. And interestingly, you talked about the new plan in that. So particularly, not exclusively, but particularly colleagues in Leanne's teams, and I was trying to get assurance on that in terms of, the plan's going to the board. Can I get some sort of stress testing it? There are groups underneath that where colleagues from my team then they have reps from each, so particularly, but not exclusively, ED, mortuary, those key departments, they have a group underneath which is part of where the development came from. And we talked at length in that group about how we get assurances on both the training of the plan, general training in terms of major incident, the 3C model. So that is, I think, is going to be a way where I'll be able to, through committee and up to board, give those ongoing assurances. The test will be in terms of the exercise, in terms of readiness, but it is a absolute ongoing focus. It's not a big team, the EPRR team, but in terms of their being out based in the Grange and out in services. So the colleagues representing the divisions gave me assurance that they all knew their plans. They had hard copies of their action cards. They were very much engaged, but I think we need to stress test that through the exercise.
Yeah,
both planned exercises and how we introduce an element of unplanned.
There are huge numbers of people that might need to know about it, but you could just have look when you're on the day when it happens, and if you haven't read the plan.
Thank you. Yes. Yes, I shan't tell you what happened in Frenchay once about the plan, which we were planning to do on Wednesday. And the call came that this exact scenario came in the day before, and it had actually happened. And so we had to all hands to the pump. So let's hope that doesn't happen. Paul?
Is there anything we can do to help you with regard to the plan? And it's all set out, but any support you need at all?
No, thank you, Paul, but thanks, I appreciate it.
Well done.
Phil?
Yeah, just on the operational procedures, and I just wondered whether it says in section 6 that only the Grange can be used. I understand there may be sound reasons for that, but I mean, if we did get an incident, then these procedures will become enshrined in stone, really, won't they? And I just wonder whether we could have another line in there that would give the people in charge the opportunity to commission other units that we may have, dependent on the need of the incident, really. I mean, I'm thinking if you were to have an older person's home in North Gwent that there's a problem, you might need to admit people maybe to Yab or something, rather than saying everybody has to go to the Grange. I just wonder whether we are painting ourselves into a corner that we could perhaps just have a get out clause there for that. And the other thing, section 21 talks about the helipad, and it said that it will be open. I guess it is open now, isn't it? Not that it will be open. Is it open?
It is.
No?
Yeah.
So I guess that's just a typo probably there. And the other thing that's lacking in there for me is any reference to organisations which may already be on the ground and how we might relate to them, because I know some of the disaster look back exercises have said that that's been a failing from the statutory organisations that we march in and we don't relate to what's already there. That's just a comment, that's all.
Yeah, they're really helpful. Thanks, Phil. So the helipad is just clearly an oversight in the final editing. The role of the other hospitals, so in terms of our responses, is the GUH, in a major incident, the GUH would be our receiving hospital.
Yeah, appreciate that.
I referred earlier to a meeting we had when we were going through this, and that how we get more specific about at what point and how we trigger and pull in other ELGHs is something that's been picked up through that group, but we can add a line to cover that, as you said. And yeah, point organisations on the ground, people should take back, take back and reflect in sort of the approach in terms of making sure that it's mobilised, not just the clearly other partner and defined partner category 1 responders are engaged, but I think it's probably more partners and organisations on the ground, and from a third sector perspective probably mean, is it, Phil?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you may have organisations like Red Cross or something or whatever that might be useful that are already there. That's all.
Yeah. Thanks, Phil. So we're happy to approve that with those tweaks. Thank you. 3.5, establishment of the NHS Wales Joint Commissioning Committee.
Okay, thank you, Chair. This has been a significant amount of work over the last 6 months in particular, which has resulted in the establishing of a new Joint Commissioning Committee, which is as a result of basically reorganising Welsh Health Specialist Services Companies, Emergency Ambulance Services and the National Collaborative Commissioning Unit, and using those to form a new Joint Commissioning Committee to have responsibility for national commissioning arrangements with some kind of set scope and functions. It's been a significant undertaking, probably more complicated than was anticipated, and Rani has provided significant support into this project as well. So the lot of work has been done on obviously the accountability framework, the accountability map, the roles around the different tiers within the organisation, and some of the hosting agreement because Contact Morgannwg is the host of this new body, and they currently host some of the existing bodies as well. So we now got the point where this is going to come into establishment from the 1st of April. It is probably worth pulling out to relevance because we obviously host 111 programme at the moment, and that element, the large element of the 111 programme is going to be part of the new JCC, with other elements going to the Six Scores programme. We will no longer be able to 111 as a result of that. So what the board has been asked to do is to kind of note the establishment now of the new committee, and the work that's been undertaken around the governance framework as a key component of the Health Board's governance framework, and to formally adopt the amendments to the standing orders, SFIs, etc. And also note the accountability. So any detailed questions, I'm sure Rani will answer them for you, or I can answer them in terms of kind of the broader objective. But you know, just want to acknowledge the amount of work that's been undertaken by so many parties across Wales. But thank you.
Thank you. I just have one question. I support this, and it's, as you said, the documentation is there's a lot of it in terms, but it all looks absolutely fine. My question was, because we're now combining these various committees, were there efficiency savings coming from that? Because I know we've obviously had to passport money into these areas, so I just wondered, you know, were there efficiency savings coming out of that? Have we reduced the number of people supporting the various committees? I'm just thinking you would have 3 committee structures. So
I think that was a fair challenge that was set up front, that it shouldn't cost any more, and we should strive to get efficiencies given. But I think it wasn't set as a specific. It was recognising we need, because of some of the, you know, the HR issues around, you know, working with the existing force. But I think once it's established, there is a piece of work that we'll look to how we could maximise the full benefits of having that merged. But up front, I think there was a clear kind of principle set that this shouldn't cost more, and in fact should look at how we could improve efficiency. It was not set a target or anything. That was right. Yeah, and the OCP process for the structure is only just commencing. That review and rationalisation of the structures hasn't yet been worked through. So there may be opportunities identified through that process, but at this stage, the commitment for no further additional cost is there.
Thank you.
Paul, can I ask about a great paper? Very well done. Just to understand this, because now could be a committee. Looking on page 333, it says the current hosting arrangement should be retained or would need to be reviewed after the new entity is established. It's a committee, because the current is Contact, I think the current. So, what are the thoughts about where it could go then? If there's a joint committee and not going to be hosted by one of the boards, where would it go then?
So this is there's almost a phased approach.
Right.
So this is the first phase. We're bringing together national commission arrangements into one place. It would have to be a hosted function, given it's a joint committee of the health boards. If there were to be a different model, which is where I think it was perhaps considered to be a future phase, it would probably need to be legislative change to create a separate body that would take responsibilities away from local health board. So this probably is the most appropriate arrangement that delivers the responsibilities of all 7 health boards on its behalf.
Because that's helpful. So this, basically, it's a subcommittee then.
Yeah, so currently, yes.
It's
It'll be a joint committee.
a joint committee. And I just wondered, so in terms of the, if you've got all the chief executives on, etc., who decides on the overall budget?
So the plan is it's the same as what happens with Wisk and East now. So the delegated responsibilities will be to the committee. There's a chair, lay members, and all 7 chief executives. And there's an agreement about the financial plan required.
Right.
And that is exactly the same as what happens now with East and Wisk. And then that comes back into, forms part of our own planning and financial planning arrangements.
Okay, so this sounds like a much better, the new arrangements sound much better, do they?
Well, it's just going back to where it was 6 years ago.
Right.
It'll be one process rather than 2. So it should be more streamlined.
And will they be looking after medicines again? The some of the high
IPFR.
education. So I didn't see that anywhere in there.
No,
Is
it's
there anything else?
functionality just.
Stuff has remained the same from the existing VETs. But I think that's something that can be looked at, I think, going forward as a phase 2 is, so phase 1 was let's get it established, almost like a transfer. And then phase 2 will be about testing its scope and kind of thing.
How do you feel about it?
Yeah, I think I think it makes sense to streamline. It's been more complicated than I anticipated it would be.
Yeah.
But I think, it does make sense, and I think, as Shelley pointed out, and many chief execs did, we should look to how can this be more effective and efficient in terms of a model, and I think people will welcome a review in terms of let's test whether the scope is correct.
Yeah, good.
So I think it's an important first step in streamlining our commissioning approach across Wales.
I think it's also given the opportunity to clarify and strengthen the governance arrangements within the joint committee.
Yeah, good.
And the hosting arrangements. So it's given that focus that is needed, I think.
Yeah, and it allows us now to have a reassertion of how the health boards will hold their decision making to account.
Good.
Because that's been a bit weak.
Yeah.
Penny?
So, yes, I see that each local health board will be bound by the decision of the joint committee, and which is great. I think it's an excellent idea. But as a local authority, we're just having problems at the moment with a joint procurement committee, which is hosted by another local authority, and one particular issue doesn't suit our needs at all. And I just wondered if you had a local issue, whether you can have any comeback, whether you can, be regarded as a separate entity.
Yes.
Because not everything suits everybody.
No. So we've tried to be really clear about what responsibilities can be discharged through the joint committee arrangement, what responsibilities must rest with health boards and with statutory duties, and then what are the responsibilities of the host body. So procurement, for example, the procurement practices belong to the host body only. So there are a number of schema delegations. So there's delegations to the joint committee itself, joint delegations from the host body to the joint commissioning team, and then there'll be separate delegations to the chief commissioner as well. So there's only so far the joint committee can act, recognising the statutory responsibility. Yes.
Could I ask the cost of the current model compared to the new model? Is there any differences? That being all arrangements?
No, so there's a commitment that there'll be no additional cost.
Helpful.
But it will be reviewed. Yeah.
Anything further?
We'll see how it goes. Thank you. We note and adopt and approve. All the rest of it. Yeah. Something lighter, although it's got some disastrous results in it. It's the public health report, please, Trace.
Thank you, Claire. Really pleased to bring this to board today. As you know, I've got a statutory requirement to produce an annual report every year, as by the fact it's annual. And the report is to show the health and wellbeing of the population, or a segment of the population, or a theme of the population. And I've chosen this year as a starting point to start with our babies, children and young people. It's very timely. It's mine and Hannah's 1 year anniversary of joining the health board next week. So this is my anniversary gift to the board. We went out and started having conversations with children. The conversations were very much about trying to get a bit of a time capsule about what it was like to be a child and young person living through a global pandemic, what their experiences were, what their frustrations were. As is the case with children, as they are our best educators, they told us a million things we needed to know that we'd never thought about. So it was a great experience. We spent a lot of time in various schools, talking with teachers. We reached out to parents that were new parents, so had their babies during lockdown, and what that experience was like, not having the usual visitors, and the help, what impact that had in terms of perinatal mental health. And all of those conversations coming through, speaking to teachers, some of the emotional and physical changes that they'd seen in children. So our current year 4s, for example, so our 8-year-olds, the changes in their ability to handwrite, because they weren't doing as much painting and handwriting in reception in year 1, because they weren't in school, so their muscles haven't developed in their hands. So we're seeing poorer handwriting in our 7 and 8-year-olds. So those consequences that I suppose at the start of the pandemic no one was thinking about, but we're going to be starting to see a lot of in the future, and we'll continue to get more and more knowledge around this. So the ask of the children was to be very honest with us, and they were frankly honest. Then one child started talking about comparing COVID to what it'd be like to be a certain animal, and that just started the whole safari journey then. So there's a huge part in the report about COVID and what would it be like if COVID was an animal, and they talk about, you know, the fear that comes with that and the animals that represent that, the loneliness, the changes. So we take that journey through the safari. And then at the end of it, we asked the children that what would their ask be of me. So what my role was explain to them and what they needed from me for the future. And then those requests were collated into a single open letter from a collaborative child called Jo. And she's written the open letter to me and the asks. And that open letter is now going to form the start of the babies, children and young people strategy for us in terms of the work that we would start to do. What has emerged from that in terms of the conversations and what we are gleaning from the work we're doing on the joint strategic assessment is starting to give us an idea of where we need to focus in terms of the delivery of this agenda. So some of the things that came through quite strongly from the data in particular, which we've talked about, is that around vaccinations and how we keep our children safe. And we know that the best protection we can give to our children from a medical point of view is to make sure they're vaccinated. So that would be one of the priorities that we start to look at. Another piece of work that I want to start is something called Challenging the Word Gap. So children in our poorest populations will hear 30 million less words by the time they're 3 than those children living in our more affluent areas. And the reason why language is so important is it's our starting point of how we negotiate our position in life. And it also gives us our understandings of words and language is also what enables us to engage in education. We know that education is the key ingredient for long-term economic prosperity. So getting the word gap closed between our poorest and richest children is absolutely key for me. So we want to move away from telling our children to sit down and shut up and actually get them chatting as much as we can. And whether that's, we want to let them engage in really complicated conversations. They don't have to understand it while they're little, but just hearing as many words as they possibly can, and making sure that books are readily available, inspiring reading amongst families and those kind of things. That would be one thing. Another targeted point of view, one of the biggest indicators we have around inequalities in a society is infant mortality. So doing some work around challenging infant mortality and making sure that our parents are as safe as they possibly can be during that maternity journey. I also want to start a piece of work around changing the narrative around obesity. We hear a lot around children and healthy weight, and we start measuring children quite young, and that gives us a benchmark. And we all know, it's well documented, that healthy weight is key in terms of long-term health. But actually, what it also does is shames and stigmatizes people. So I want to change the narrative about healthy weight being about calories in and energy out, and start to think about the influences of trauma on weight, medical conditions, the treatments that people are exposed to, and really start to think about the causes of disorder around healthy weight, and have conversations about healthy food, not about weight, and to change that dial in and remove the shame and the stigma that exists around that agenda. And again, it's a real blame culture that we need to move away from, because the minute people feel shamed, they cut off from hearing the information that is probably going to support them to live healthier lives. So keeping those information channels really open. When we started talking to the older children and young people, it started to move into relationships. Some of them were talking about what they were seeing at home and some of the things around that. So children recognising what is a healthy relationship, particularly for those children that are potentially living in homes where domestic abuse is a factor. We know that those children are 50% more likely to want to either be a victim or a perpetrator of domestic abuse themselves. So how do we start to teach children what a healthy relationship is? And that was a big conversation point. And linked to that, the ideas of consent. So making sure that you are giving consent and making sure that you're hearing consent is really key. And that was wrapped up in the conversation around teenage pregnancy. Gwent is slightly higher than the Welsh average around teenage pregnancy. So are we doing enough around information, accessibility for young people around contraception? Are we getting the condom message out there in terms of safer sex? And if young people do become pregnant, are they supported and given the right information, become healthy, happy parents so that they can have happy, healthy babies? It's really, really important. Vaping featured quite strongly, and we're doing a lot of work on that. We know that young people are accessing vapes from outlets that possibly aren't regulated, and we have had incidents where vapes have been laced with illicit drugs. So the harm and risk around that is absolutely key. So we'll be doing some work on that. And again, linked to the word gap, really building educational aspirations right throughout a child's life. One thing they are really knowledgeable about is climate change. And their ask was around the fact that they don't hear us talking about it enough. And they were talking about air quality and the impact on their health. Children that were living with asthma, living by roads, they were really picking up on that. So we do need to start and extend those conversations with them. And the thing that linked this in to me, and one child was talking about that their mum was pregnant, so was very concerned about the environment for their new little brother or sister that was about to be born. And it brought me to thinking in terms of, are we really testing ourselves on how we're delivering against the well-being of future generations? Are we creating a world that actually is going to be better for our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren that are yet to be born? Are we doing enough around that? And are we bringing children into the policy conversation so that they have an opportunity to build the policies that are going to shape the world that they grow up in? So in terms of how we engage with children going forward, I think is going to be far more at the forefront in terms of the work that I'd like to do within the team. So in terms of next steps, we're going to do lots of engagement with children. We're going to do a full comprehensive health needs assessment with children, and this will be both quantitative and qualitative. We want children's stories to test the data in terms of what the data tells us. Is it really the truth? Does it really represent the lives of our children in Gwent? That will then inform, like I say, a baby's children and young people's strategy that will start to really look at the full range of the way we need to look at children. So it will go over 4 themes. So it will look at fairer, stronger, safer, healthier children, and those building blocks in terms of how we start to deliver services for our young folk that we need to listen to a little bit more. I'll stop there.
Thank you ever so much. That was really helpful, and it's a lovely report. I have to say the pictorial on page, what is it, 13? It's truly horrifying. And we look forward to seeing the action plan that'll arise from that, so that we can all ensure that we provide children with a better life for the future. But thank you, that was really good. Paul?
I'm involved with the Children and Young People's Partnership, and I think it'd be really good to present this paper to that particular group. Kavitha chairs it, and I think Jenny's involved, etc. But this particular paper, I think, was incredibly helpful. And I think page 13, which is what you mentioned, Anne, I mean, because for me, looking at the 1 in 5 vaping, for example, which has become a big issue, I think, recently, and also the number of people involved with domestic abuse as well. And that, I think, actually drilling down into this and going into schools, etc., is I think this is incredibly rich in data and a very interesting read in terms of reports. And therefore, you followed up by the sort of next steps, and I think that's just to be applauded. This is really good stuff to work on.
Thank you. Pippa and then Jennifer.
Just, it's really about how we share this, I think, with kind of our partners, because one of the things that struck me was the kind of letter from Joe. And I don't really like to go into town any longer on a Saturday. I avoid groups of people, something along those lines. And I thought there's so much stuff we hear in the press about the decline in our town centres. And some of it, of course, will be driven by young people who used to go into town on a Saturday and who aren't doing that any longer. So there's a question, isn't there, about how can we share this with the PSBs and the RPBs and our wider stakeholder groups in order for them to get that knowledge that you've managed to gather, because that all ties into the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. And it would be really interesting, actually, to send a copy of this to their office.
Yes,
because
I
think they'd really like to see it.
And I think you make a really good point, Pippa, around children's perception of safety and contextual safeguarding. And it's one of the conversations that I've started to have with directors of social care in terms of what is a safe space and how we can start to influence things like the plannings of simple things like the way parks are planted up. We know that things like clusters of trees and bushes create an opportunity for harm, and attack and violence. So thinking about just the way our open spaces are planted up and how we can really think about how the context of the way people live their lives can be made safe. And so all of that needs to be brought in. But yeah, I think children and young people in particular, young teenagers, have stopped socialising in the way they used to. And they've even, the resistance to attend school, has increased since COVID as well. Children that found school hard before COVID, out of that rhythm of school during lockdowns has made it really hard for them to re-engage. So yeah, they are becoming quite increasingly reclusive and rely on social media as their social interaction, and we know the harms that exist.
Tracy will know that I'm massively supportive as a former health visitor. The early life chances that young people get really impact their lives, and we have a duty and a responsibility to get that right, because if we are ever going to deliver sustainability as an organisation, it lies in the health and well-being of our children and young people. So from a more service perspective, I am hugely supportive, and Tracy and I are going to establish a children and young people's strategic board within the health board, which will then feed into the RPB arrangements and the children's rights and participation forum, which is a really good meeting in terms of getting that feed, particularly for young people. I think, Tracy, around some of the issues that they're grappling and dealing with. But one of the things that I think where we have one of our biggest risks is in the delivery of the Healthy Child Wales programme. It's within some of the quality reports and performance reports. We know that health visiting and school nursing in Wales is not where it should be. There are national pieces of work, but those are our universal contact services. We've done a lot of work with maternity around antenatal period, but there is work to do in health visiting and school nursing, which I think will help and impact. So it'll be really great when we connect those programmes with Tracy's work to make sure we've got that cohesive approach. But I love it. Made me cry when I read it. Thank you. Annie?
Yeah, just so supportive of it. It's a fantastic report and so easy to read, but there are so many lessons to be learned post-COVID. That's what really affected me their perception, the young people's perception of the effect it had on them. But the most poignant of all for me was reading the young fathers' statements, where they felt powerless and undervalued. And that should never happen again. That is a real lesson we've got to learn. You know, whatever the dangers of infection or whatever, you cannot separate people to that extent. The knock-on effect at home now, that those people who feel that and their anxiety and their worthlessness must affect the young people. So it's something we've got to learn for the future, I think. Lovely. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I think that's well endorsed, so thank you very much.
That'll do nicely, thank you.
We look forward to seeing your action and actually action taking place.
Action priority. Thanks, Anne.
Thank you. Cancer Services Annual Report, please, James.
Thank you very much, Anne. So a huge amount of activity in the cancer space this year, and I want to just flag three kind of main headings. The first is around